You'll have to bear with me here, and maybe Jimmy as well. I can't speak for Jimmy, but you'll have to bear with me, folks, this morning or this afternoon, I should say, because it feels like morning to me because I'm groggy. It's a sleep deprivation Tuesday for me. I'm a little bit groggy. I'm trying to caffeinate and get going, and
you're also raising a newborn.
Well, that's it. See, it's not that, and I'm fortunate. I have really no excuse and no reason to be sleep deprived, except for this. I got plenty of sleep, and got up this morning and felt good. And it was. Now it's a tough time of year because it's that time of year where you wake up and it's like 45, and then by the middle of the afternoon you've got on layers and you got to start delayering and everything else. But I then realized. It's not because I had a rigorous work schedule. It's not because I had a long weekend. It's not because I didn't go to bed on time or that I woke up too early or that I had a bottle feeding to do at 3 o'clock in the morning or any of those things. And I am a known night owl. It's not uncommon for me to be up until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Wasn't the case last night. I got to bed at a decent hour, got a decent sleep. But then I woke up and I didn't know if it was allergies. I didn't know if it was the change in temperature. I couldn't pinpoint it, and then realized that I'm actually just overall energy fatigued because watching Bob Costas last night zapped it all out of me. I just decided that that's what it is. And I know that Bob Costas is a legendary broadcaster, and I have a ton of respect for Bob Costas, and I think he's a tremendous, one of the best ever studio host. But play-by-play is just not his forte. It was at one time, perhaps. But I watched a little bit, when I say a little bit, I mean literally that, of the Royals and Yankees last night, and not only did he sound disappointed when the Yankees had a few rallies stopped, but for the most part, it sounded like I was at a book reading at Nora Library. I was like, are we talking about what's happening on the game, or are we doing more dissertation on random 1960s baseball players? And that's me talking, right? I mean, I'm the king of it. So, but at any rate, I woke up and I was feeling kind of groggy, and then I was thinking, well, I know that we got to get to the Colts here today, and there's a lot going on in terms of a conversation and a theme from yesterday that's going to carry over to today. But on my way in, I'm thinking about all this, and I'm thinking out what we're going to do and how we're going to outline it and everything else, and then all of a sudden I see something. I see something flash before me and come across my phone, and then I hear CNC Music Factory.
Oh, good. It wasn't your life that was flashing before your eyes.
No, I have had that, though. It's called Panoramic Life Review. I had that happen. It's a very bizarre situation. I saw it in third person, though, when it happened. That is a true story, by the way. But when I saw this flash before me on my phone, then all of a sudden I heard the CNC Music Factory. And that song that I reference every once in a while that was I'm going to guess it peaked at number 18 on the Billboard chart in the fall of 1990. But it was Things That Make You Go, And I saw that the New York Jets fired their coach. And I thought, well, nobody cares that the New York Jets fired their coach. There's not a person in Indianapolis that cares that the New York Jets fired their coach. And you try to localize stories, and I'm thinking, okay, well, nobody here cares about the fact that Joe Namath and the New York Jets got their lone Super Bowl by guaranteeing victory over the then Baltimore Colts. And people have forgotten about the fact that it was the New York Jets that the Colts had to beat in the AFC title game with Mark Sanchez in order to go to a Super Bowl. And I believe it was the New York Jets I think it was the Jets that the Colts pulled all their starters off the field and sacrificed a perfect season. So the Jets, outside of that, the Jets really have no true link or comparison or connection to the Indianapolis Colts and the fact that they fired their coach now and whatever. And people have Jets fatigue. And then I thought about it really deep. And I heard the CNC Music Factory. And Eddie Garrison, I would like for you, if you could, please, to do me a favor and pull up. There we go. That's right. That's right, baby. I'll be honest with you. One of the things that makes me go, is how in the world did we think this was cool? In the fall of 1990, my senior year of high school, this and the CNC Music Factory hit it big, baby. This was like the North Central anthem of the senior bonfire in 1990. But their album at least was. Having said that, if you could please, for me, Eddie Garrison, pull up the resume of one Robert, Saleh, right?
Saleh.
I say Saleh. So pull up Robert Saleh's resume.
Okay. You won in college and the pros, or just the pros?
I'd like for you, if you could, to start most recently. So Robert Saleh walks in for a job interview. Let's say that he's going to pull the Meta World piece. He's going to pull the Ron Artest, and he wants to get a job at Circuit City. So I'm the manager at Circuit City, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at it. Or for that matter, it's New York City, so we're going to go with Nobody Beats the Wiz. So I'm working at the Nobody Beats the Wiz, and I've got before me the resume of Mr. Robert Saleh, okay? And you are Robert. Eddie, you get to play the part of Robert in this case,
groovy.
Okay? You ready? Okay, so I'm Jeremy, the manager at Circuit City, okay? Mr. Saleh, thanks for coming in today. Appreciate it. Traffic
Thanks
okay on the way in?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
Okay. And
I'm kind of used to it around here.
I appreciate your interest in Circuit, Nobody Beats the Wiz. I used to work with Circuit City a few years ago, and then I made the move here, and it's a great company, and I appreciate your interest. But I'm looking at your resume here. In terms of Nobody Beats the Wiz, what's the most recent place you worked, Mr. Saleh?
I was with the New York Jets.
Okay,
I started there in 2021, and my job there ended in 2024. I was the head coach.
Were you in the video and audio division, or I'm curious about Nobody Beats the Wiz? What did you do for the Jets?
I was the head coach.
Oh, the head coach. Okay.
Yeah, I was the head coach.
What about before that, Mr. Saleh? Where did you work before there?
I was with the San Francisco 49ers. I was there for about 3 years. Yeah. Started in 17, ended in 2020.
And were you the head coach for the 49ers?
I was the defensive coordinator.
Defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then where were you? And Bay Area is lovely, isn't it? It's a beautiful area.
Oh my goodness,
we were
it's
thinking
fantastic.
About expanding. They're talking about doing a Nobody Beats the Wiz in Palo Alto.
You know, I make often trips to San Diego, and it's like that 363 days a year, like
beautiful
it is right
there.
now.
It's beautiful there in San Diego, year-round, as a matter of fact. You are correct. Where were you before the San Francisco 49ers, Mr. Saleh?
I had a couple years down in Jacksonville and Duval County with the Jaguars as their linebackers coach.
Linebackers coach.
Yeah, that's right.
You're a linebacker coach there. And then before, was that your first job in football, Mr. Saleh?
No, it was not.
Where were you before that?
Before that, I was in Seattle.
Oh, Seattle's beautiful. This time of year, the drizzle. But have you been to Seattle?
I have indeed.
Beautiful city. And what did you do there for the Seahawks? They have great uniforms. What did you do for the Seahawks?
I was their defensive quality control
coach.
A lot of time on the West Coast, Mr. Saleh. Any particular reason for that? Just, the air out there?
I did. Yeah, the air, the weather.
Okay.
So was that your first venture?
I was a single man at one point. Now I'm not a single man.
Nice.
So have you worked other jobs, Mr. Saleh, in terms of your football career?
Oh, yeah. Tons of jobs.
Okay. Give me a few of those before Seattle that you were where you were.
I was in Houston.
Okay.
I was there for a while. I was in Georgia in college football.
Okay.
Central Michigan and Michigan
State. What did you do for those jobs?
Oh, a variety of different things. I started at Michigan State as an offensive assistant. Then I became a defensive assistant. Then I went to Central Michigan and was a defensive assistant there. I was a linebackers coach / defensive assistant in Georgia.
So it seems like you have a very vast resume on the defensive side of the football, Mr. Saleh.
Yes, that is indeed correct.
And also it seems like you have a fairly, even though the head coaching situation did not work out for you with the Jets, I know this much because I work, Nobody Beats the Wiz, but everybody beats the Jets. So that doesn't make you an uncommon. It seems as though you have vast experience on the defensive side of the football. Do you think, would you be interested in, perhaps I could make a few phone calls if you don't want to work at Nobody Beats the Wiz, would you be able by chance or be interested in maybe maintaining a position defensively as a defensive coach in the NFL?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Do you know of any? I'd like to make some phone calls for you because you're a nice fella. Do you know any places where that could be a possibility, or have you got any boots on the ground or ears to the ground on what jobs could eventually open up where you could potentially land on your feet?
I've worked in the West Coast. I've worked on the East Coast. I think I want to try the Midwest now.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because I don't know, but we've got Al that you might have seen down. He works in the TV department here.
Really?
Nobody Beats the Wiz. Al's from Kokomo, Indiana.
Where's that?
I don't know, but the Beach Boys sang about it once.
Okay.
So at any rate, Al, because of that, oftentimes listens to a radio program, and you ought to hear this idiot that they have on in the midday there. And when Al listens to it, I noticed the other day they were talking about the fact that their defensive coordinator, apparently, they've really struggled this year.
I saw that. Some guy that gets spray tans and wears a lot of cologne from what I hear, right?
That's not the defensive
guy you're talking about?
But that is the guy that you're talking about on the radio. But the defensive coordinator there, apparently, there are people that think that he could be in hot water. Now,
really?
Yeah, Mr. Saleh, here's the thing. We don't know that Indianapolis is going to be looking for that position during the course of the year, and we certainly at Circuit City or Nobody Beats the Wiz, I keep forgetting that that's where I work now, we could possibly get you in here temporarily, but I have a feeling, I don't think it's going to be before the new year, but I would simply not rule out the possibility that your name could surface for other vacancies that might happen in football, in particular on the defensive side of the ball. And so it's interesting because when Al was telling me that the guy he was listening to was talking about the fact that nobody in Indianapolis cares about the Jets, but now suddenly it seems as though those in Indianapolis might have reason to be interested in the fact that you have become available, because it seems as though you have a very vast defensive-minded background on your resume, including at San Francisco as the defensive coordinator that led you to get hired by the Jets because you did a really good job there, and we shall see. So while we are excited to have you on board as part of our Geek Squad, I just wanted to make sure that you're not selling yourself short and potentially keeping things open should something ever open up in Indianapolis, because it's my understanding that they're doing anything they can to connect the Jets story to the Colts story, and this seems like one that could be a possibility.
I appreciate you having my best interest here and looking for me to get back into where I belong. And I know this is temporary, but I'm glad to join the company.
We're thank you so much. We're happy to have you on board with the company. And just remember, maybe not in the NFL, but certainly in the NBA, nobody beats the Wiz.
Okay.
Actually, in the NBA, nobody loses to him.
You've got my resume. You've got all my references. So
I
just
have to resume.
Please
That's
make sure
correct.
you pass all that info along to my next employer.
But here's the thing. So Gus Bradley isn't going anywhere, at least not right now. But Gus Bradley is, and oftentimes we see this. I don't know that the Colts season is going to go south. They are getting ready to go into a much more rigorous stretch here than that of which they've started. And by that I mean, I know that they have Tennessee and I know they have the bye, but the schedule gets pretty real. Once the leaves start falling and the weather turns a little bit, the schedule for the Colts gets very real. And if this looks like a season that is taking on water, and if Jim Irsay in particular becomes unhappy with the direction of the franchise, Chris Ballard's not going anywhere this year. Shane Steichen's certainly not going anywhere this year. But you have to put forth the perception that you are doing what you can to limit the water that you're taking on. And you have to make sure that the fan base and the ticket buyers and the sponsors feel like you are doing something to get yourself righted and like you're pushing forward, even though this is a year that truly is about Anthony Richardson. It's way cart before the horse at this point. But part of following sports and analyzing it is oftentimes looking around the corner, having your head on a swivel. I always say it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. Is now the situation for the Colts if this defense, which has been porous at best, which, yes, has been injured. I'm not saying it's all even entirely Gus Bradley's fault. But you can bet that if a change needs to be made and this defense doesn't improve in any way, shape, or form, he is the name that is going to be the one that falls closest to the sword. And if that's the case, does Jimmy Cook, and I'm not saying you have the answer to this, I'm asking it rhetorically, does now that possibility become increased in terms of its likelihood with the fact that you have available on the street right now a guy that is a proven defensive side of the ball coach?
Yeah, this is an easy conversation for me. If Robert Saleh was interested in right now, hours after, moments after even getting fired from the Jets as a head coach, wanted this season to be a defensive coordinator, I would thank Gus Bradley for his time, be on the phone with him and giving him whatever he wants. What he was able to do in terms of developing a defensive unit over the 3 seasons and change that he was with San Francisco was nothing short of integral to what helped them get to the Super Bowl in the 2019 season. They were 6th in the league in forced turnovers that year in 2019. They were 2nd in total defense, 4th in sacks. He gets guys to play for him. He's able to find talent in terms of team building and make defenses that are feared around the National Football League. And the Colts right now, they could get shredded 6 ways to Sunday, whether it is through the running game, whether it's through the air. There's a lot of weaknesses with this group, and especially if you are a Colts fan that thinks that they are operating frugally, if you think that maybe they're not being as aggressive as they should be from a financial standpoint, he has shown an ability to get creative with less talent, even if he's on a budget. So, yeah, if Robert Saleh is available, and there's been some early reports out there, which would make sense because his family's in New York and he has kids in school, it would make sense if he wants to wait, sit it out, and approach this at the hiring cycle next offseason. But from a personal standpoint, if he told his agent, hey, I want to go get a job, I don't think twice about it.
Do we know who sits in this seat that I'm sitting in? Is this Andy's seat?
I believe so.
I don't know if Andy's experienced this, maybe, but this thing's like all, have you noticed this thing's all off kilter? Like, I feel like honestly, this feels like an NFL coaching seat. It's like a coaching carousel seat. Like, this thing's all over the place. Have you noticed that? I'm going to fall out of the seat by the end of the show. I'm virtually guaranteeing it. Those of you watching right now on the YouTube channel, and thank you so much for doing so in the break room here, you're going to see me at some point fall out of this chair. I'm just predicting it right now. This thing's all, I don't know, what's Andy doing to this thing?
All right, Eddie, put the screws back in. It's time. We're found out.
What is going on here?
What are you talking about?
So that's usually that chair. The middle chair is usually the really, I think I'm going to fall out of the chair
wonky
one.
Chair?
Yes.
Well, I had the other one that's the normal chair, and maybe that's the one that Andy sits in, and I don't know if he's got back issues or whatever, but like I sat down in it, and I felt like I was like the little old lady that was in front of Ferris Bueller's dad driving the car. Like it was all wonky in terms of it was straight up and as if I don't know, it was just odd. And then I got in this one and I'm about to fall out.
By the way, just for your overall critiques from your showmates, castmates here, what is the cutoff line to reference where we need to say nice job Costas to you? Because I would accept Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but for future reference, where is the line where we need to be like, okay, let's.
It's really good. It's a really good question. And truth be told, Jimmy, you know, I thought about this last night. An interesting dynamic happened while I was watching the baseball game. And a strange thing happens to you, which has happened to me. And I'm the first to admit it. There is, I think all of us in sports and in music in general are vacuumed. Like right now, and I've said this before on the air, but if you're listening to my voice right now, and thank you for doing so, if you're out there listening right now, but if I were to ask most people, okay, tell me the sports team and season that you know the most about, and tell me the music that you know the most about, and listen to the most regularly, I think most people would immediately revert to something that happened between their ages of 15 and 24 years old. That becomes like your vapor lock vacuum on pop culture in general.
Sure.
Okay? And then a weird thing happens where you become 52 years old and you realize that what to you seems to be, and it happens a lot, obviously, with both of you guys, things that I think are
topical,
household knowledge or topical are like, yeah, that's, and I have to remind myself, that's 25 years ago. Okay? And I think that it's healthy for myself or really anybody, but like in watching Bob Costas last night, and he is a legendary broadcaster and one of the smoothest orators in the history of broadcasting. His work in the Olympics and other such things are still state of the art. I don't think it's a critique of him as a broadcaster to say that play-by-play is not necessarily his strong suit, because he's doing more of a radio play-by-play, which is his background, than television. But as I was watching him, I was being reminded of the danger zone that I myself am guilty of. So pot calling kettle black here. For example, he was talking about the 1980 American League Championship Series, referencing, and I can tell you, I mean, I remember U.L. Washington and Hal McRae and Willie Wilson and all of the, you know, and Greg Nettles and all of it, right? but he was discussing it as if rhetorically all of his audience knew exactly what he was discussing. And I'm like, man, that was 44 years ago. And if you were to go back and watch the 1980 American League Championship Series, I don't know how much they would have been referencing the 1936 World Series as the first without Babe Ruth and the first with Joe DiMaggio. But that was also 44 years prior to. So you have to remind yourself how archaic that would have sounded in 1980. And thus you remind yourself that that's how archaic that 1980 sounds to many of today's viewers. So for me, I would like to think that the things that I reference of yesteryear are things that have maintained a relevance. Fast Times at Ridgemont High being one of them, or Peyton Manning's Colts teams being one of them. But I'm not necessarily saying that that's the case. I absolutely, at times, no question, can fall into that. Now, other things that were 30 years ago, which I realize is a long time ago, are still all over the place today. Seinfeld being one of them. I mean, it's on like 5 times a night, right? I mean, you could still watch it if you wanted to. But if I start referencing on the regular basis lines from Bosom Buddies, I would expect both of you to be like, what are you talking about? You know? But years go on, seasons go on, seasons start up anew, seasons fold from the prior. That's going to be the case tonight with the Pacers. It is not the official start of the season, but it is preseason game number 1 tonight. The Atlanta Hawks, that is going to be on NBA TV. That is available to view here in Indianapolis because it is not blacked out. Some of those games, as you guys know, we've seen with Bally's and all of the drama that's going on at times when there are games on NBA TV and they get blacked out because Bally's has the rights to it. This game tonight is not blacked out, so if you have NBA television, you're going to be able to watch it here in Central Indiana. And let's be real, there's a lot more, even than a year ago, promise, expectation, excitement about this Pacers team versus what we saw a year ago, partially based on what they were able to do. And there are 2 players, that I think are That's right.
Nice.
2 players that I think are perhaps seeing the NBA open up a path for them a little bit to really flourish this year versus last. And there are 2 guys that I think that stylistically really can benefit this year from what Indiana looks to do. I'll tell you who those 2 are coming up in just a couple of minutes. Stephen Holder coming up 1 o'clock today. We also have Alex Golden coming up at 2 o'clock. Also, a reminder that now through the end of the year, anybody who belongs to a monthly car wash program can save $20 off a signature oil change and get a free tire rotation from Jiffy Lube. That's right. Go into Jiffy Lube. If you've got any of those stickers right there in your window for a monthly car wash program, then that means you care about the outside of your car. Jiffy Lube wants to make sure you're taking care on the inside and the tires of your car. Just point to that sticker and Jiffy Lube will do the rest. Big savings from your trusted one-stop shop for all your vehicle maintenance where you never need an appointment. It is Jiffy Lube. 2 guys that I think are primed for a breakout year for the Pacers because of a little bit of a difference in the way they're going to play. I'll tell you who they are, and I'll explain next. Now, I'd like to know this about this song. Is Rob Bass now internationally known? I would say yes, right?
Probably.
I don't know that either of the two of you have any idea what I'm referencing.
You're referencing the lyrics in this song.
Is he? Didn't you stared at the floor when I asked the question?
Yes, because I thought that was bad.
It's a legit question.
I didn't know if you were being flippant.
I'm Rob Bass, and I came to get out. I'm not internationally known.
Yeah, I didn't know if you were being flippant or if you were being serious.
He is now, right? I don't know, though. Is that song known? Like, I would imagine it is internationally. You go to Melbourne, Australia. By the way, Men at Work's on tour. Did you guys see that?
I did not see that.
I'm all in. Men at Work's on tour. Closest place they're coming is in like 3 weeks. They're going to be in some casino in Illinois. And
Are you going?
I think I might. Shannon hasn't learned of this yet, but I'm like, listen, I know you were excited to have a Saturday at home, but I got news for you. We're rolling some dice at a dicey casino in Illinois.
Is Michael coming over?
What's that?
Is Michael coming over to the States to see it?
Right. Michael's coming from Australia to go see Men at Work. It's the original band, like the original group.
Do you know what casino? Like, have you figured that much out?
It could be the new one they just opened.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
It's outside of. It's in the Chicagoland area, I think. But I think it is a casino. Yeah.
Just open like this off-track sports betting location.
I think
like
I told
the
you
back alley
a buddy of mine went to a small like casino bar in Michigan, and Pauly Shore was the entertainment. And he said Pauly Shore came out, and the first thing he said, he goes, "Look, I have no idea why I'm here either." This morning, Rick Carlisle joined the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy. That is available in podcast form. He had a fabulous story, by the way, and I thought it was kudos to those guys because I thought it was one of the best things that I've heard in a while in interviews on this radio station, where I believe it was Kevin asked Rick Carlisle about being, a pretty accomplished pianist and playing the piano. I had to make sure that I clarified.
Yeah, that's important.
And Rick Carlisle, if you've ever watched during games, he has extremely long fingers, and I'm sure that has to assist in playing the piano, truth be told. But he said that he started playing the piano when he was a kid, and he said he was about 12 years old, and then he and the teacher both looked at each other after the second practice and looked at each other and both simultaneously said, "I think I hate you." And he said that typically is the end of the teacher and student relationship. But then he went on, when he was playing at the University of Maine, he transferred to the University of Virginia, so he had to sit out a year. And during that year, he just said, "I'm just going to learn how to play the piano again." And that's one thing I've learned about Rick Carlisle from other people, not from Rick Carlisle, is that he oftentimes will challenge himself with new skills or tasks. I guess he became this may be urban legend, but I was told, I think like in woodworking, like in whittling things, like he got really good at that and got really into it. And the same in terms of playing the piano. He has befriended Bruce Hornsby. He's friends with Darius Rucker, he mentioned. He wrote his own wedding song that Bruce Hornsby performed. So it was a fascinating conversation about Rick Carlisle away from basketball. And he talked for probably 4 or 5 consecutive minutes about his musical interests. And I thought it was truly, truly fascinating. And kudos to those guys for getting him to go there. But one of the other things that he talked about was the fact that the orchestration offensively for the Pacers this year might have a different tune, because the NBA, and Rick Carlisle had mentioned this, and we mentioned this on the show a couple of weeks ago, they have made it known to the coaches and thus to the players of the NBA that they are kind of getting away from the way games have been officiated, and they're getting more into the international style of play, which is much more free in terms of swallowing the whistle. I thought it was interesting because Carlisle said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said to the guys this morning, if you are the kind of player that drives to the lane looking for a foul, and if you don't get it, turns around with both arms outreached as if to imply, where is the foul call? He basically said, it's going to be a different tune for you this year. It's going to be harder. I'm not saying that he was talking about Tyrese Halliburton, but when you think about players for the Pacers that not all the time, and Halliburton is one that did start to fall kind of into the trap at times of doing the Paul George, hey, there's no way I could have missed that shot. There's no way I could have been stripped of the ball. That doesn't happen without me getting fouled, doing that gesture. But the two players, when I got to thinking about it, that I thought would most benefit from a more physical style of play in the NBA that play for the Indiana Pacers. There are two that came to mind for me. I will open the floor to the two of you. Eddie, you are the producer of the Pacers radio network, so you
yes, sir,
are in tune to every game. So I will begin with you. Would you like to guess, and there are no wrong answers here. This is obviously subjective. But in my opinion, the two players that could most benefit from a more physical style of play in the NBA, I will let you guess, Eddie. One, you go with your first guess.
Aaron Nesmith.
Aaron Nesmith is indeed one of my two players that I thought of. You are indeed correct. So, Jimmy Cook, that leads for you the other player that I had in mind. Would you like to guess what player I was thinking
Yeah,
of?
sure. I'll throw out there Pascal Siakam.
Now, Eddie, I have not divulged.
Also, divulged
to be
last
clear,
week.
No, to be clear, though, it was also said it was subjective. So I realize we don't have a
Correct.
penalty system, but that's abuse of the board there, my friend. Felt unnecessary.
Pascal Siakam is one, though, because of his low post game. He is probably conditioned to contact, so I don't think it hurts him by any stretch. He's not one of them that I had in mind. Eddie, would you like to guess the other?
Andrew Nembhard.
Incorrect.
Ooh, then you changed
Sorry,
it up. Then you changed it up last week.
The guy that I really do
I
think,
appreciate your consistency.
because of his physicality, and I think as a player that is less distracted by, I think there are some players that it's going to be an adjustment, because if they are guarded more physically, they're not used to that. Nembhard would be certainly, Eddie, another
On the
one that would be
defensive side is what I was going
well,
with
yes,
there.
for sure. But in terms of their offensive game, Benedict Mathurin, to me, is a player that you would think is going to benefit from this because he's a stronger
Strongly
player.
Disagree.
Okay.
I agree with you. I mean, his isolation style in general and him welcoming physical contact to the bucket is
And
something
he
that I would
also,
embrace on.
more often than not,
Yeah.
is going to be guarded by somebody that is not as physically strong as he.
I disagree because he is such a big complainer. He's a bigger complainer than Tyrese. If you watch him, he's always complaining about a foul.
He's going to have to adjust to that aspect
Yeah.
of it,
The
I
whole
guess.
league
But
would
I'm
have to
saying,
adjust to that, to
but
be
I'm
honest
saying
with you.
if, in fact, there is a more physical style, his body type is more conditioned to be able to withstand
Right. His build, yeah.
His build, yes. Because he is more often – because I think he can be playing in isolated in positions where he is going against players that are not as strong as he. Now, Nembhard defensively,
Absolutely,
it is
Teddy, yeah.
absolutely to his benefit, because Nembhard will get up on you a little bit, right? Like Nembhard's got kind of that bulldog type defensive mentality about him, where he's going to get up on you in that way. But
do we go into this season anticipating from an offensive standpoint for this team, because they had a top 5, top 6 in terms of like points per game or points per possession type of season? Top 2 of all time.
Of all time, it was around that.
That was my question. I thought for all time, I thought it was top, whatever it was. It was within the top 5 of NBA history.
I think Boston set the record last year after.
you're talking about offensively?
My point is, if you you can't guarantee this in the NBA, but if you say the Pacers run it back out there again this year and they're the same level of offensive prowess they were a year ago, is all you're asking for them to be a little bit better on the defensive end like they asked all season?
And I think their defense did come along, if you think about it.
Sure,
like I think statistically a year ago, if you look at their defense, it was a little bit misleading, because the second half of the year they were so much better defensively than they were the first half. Like when their defense really ramped up, and I'm going off memory here, but was kind of around the time of the in-season tournament and getting into certainly the first and second round of the playoffs. New York is a team that it'll be interesting to see what they do, because they also, Brunson can play through a lot of contact. And, some of the teams in the East might be more prone or more conditioned for this new style of play than is the West, right? But nonetheless, I just think it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see in terms of what they do, and for those two guys, how they can benefit from it. Stephen Holder going to join us coming up 1 o'clock. Colts back on the practice field, getting into it tomorrow. But there are some numbers that jump out at you about the Colts, but I want to know if they're hollow. I'll let you guys know what those are, and then we'll get Stephen Holder's reaction to it after that. By the way, I was listening to a while ago. It's been probably a year ago. I was listening to an old Casey Kasem top 40 countdown, and he was building up the crescendo payoff of the Knack with My Sharona, and he was talking about him, and he said, "Up next, a band that many think could be the next Beatles." I'm like, well, that was close. They gave it one good half-court shot, right?
I can't.
Who are the Beatles?
I can't listen to My Sharona anymore, and I realize this isn't a new thing because the parody of it came out, long, long ago. But they did a film about Weird Al's life, Weird Al Yankovic, a couple years ago. I think Daniel Radcliffe played, and they kind of parody how he came up with My Bologna. And so now that's all I hear whenever I hear My Sharona, unfortunately.
The first Weird Al song that I remember, I think, was Eat It.
Yeah.
And then it just took off from there. And I mean, you know what I mean? And I always thought Weird Al Yankovic was both creative and funny, but I can't imagine like going and seeing him in concert. You know what I mean?
Right.
And people are like, oh man, I mean, like, do people sing along with the parodies? I don't know. But all right, so here's the thing. 263.5. You know what that number is?
Well, it's a very high temperature, if that's what it is. I'd be very worried unless you're cooking some food.
I'm assuming that is the number of yards the Colts have given up through the air this season.
Excellent guess, Eddie Garrison. Jimmy, do you have a guess? 263.5.
I would say we'll go the other side of it. I'll say rush yards given up by the Colts.
Okay. What about 163.5?
That would be rush yards given up per game.
Okay. Your guess, Jimmy?
I'll reformat and bend the knee to Eddie there. I'll say he's right.
Okay. 263.5 is right now what Joe Flacco is averaging in yards passing per game.
Wow.
The other is Anthony Richardson's average.
I see.
Now, it would lead, and then you throw in the fact for Flacco, 6 touchdowns, no picks? I believe that's correct.
Did it with his legs on Sunday, too.
And that he's found the fountain of youth, right? He is not a guy that is accustomed to starting at this point in his career double-digit number of games or adding longevity in that regard. The numbers would tell you when you look at it, as we discussed yesterday, that people are going to be tempted into talking about the fact that there's like a potential quarterback controversy, especially if Richardson misses another week and Flacco plays really well and they win. And then and if they start inching up into that, back into that wild card conversation and, breaking free from the vat of suck,
right,
where, the Chargers are and the Dolphins are and the Ravens are and the Bengals are trying to get their way into, and the Jets are, the teams that you thought were going to be contenders for a postseason berth in the AFC, and they're all log jammed together. In no way, shape, or form, Jimmy, is there a situation where Joe Flacco becomes a quarterback controversy in Indianapolis this year? None, except for this. Maybe, just maybe, when Anthony Richardson is mending back from injury, whether it be this one or another one that happens down the road, maybe the Colts get more conservative in terms of the allowance of time for Richardson to come back, because they know that they're getting good quarterback play and they want to make sure that he is as healthy as possible, as opposed to rushing him back and having injury then breed other injuries. That's the only thing where I could see Joe Flacco's quality of play impacting or affecting Anthony Richardson getting on the football field. There has to be a health factor in play. If he is 100% healthy, there is zero question. I don't care if Anthony Richardson goes out today to get his mail, slips, twists his ankle, and is out 5 weeks, and in those 5 weeks, the Colts go 5-0, and Joe Flacco's throwing for 370 yards a game, 3 touchdowns, and no picks. When Anthony Richardson is healthy and the Colts are suddenly in the scenario that I just laid out, 7-3, Richardson is your starter in game number 11.
Yeah, you and I are in agreement on that. I don't think we're in an island on that. I know there's a subsection of Colts fans that, again, are very hungry to get back to winning ways, but you're playing the long-term game here. In regards to wanting Anthony Richardson to be as healthy as possible, And Shane Steichen has kind of, publicly come out and committed to Anthony Richardson and acknowledging the fact that he is the starter. But to your point about his health, and this is information they would never reveal to us. I get that. So I'm speaking on hypotheticals here. It would have to be from the medical staff or his trainers or whatever, putting him out there now would have to be like a re-injury risk of greater than 40% for me to think, you know what, we should pump the brakes and ease him back. Like, it would have to be a legitimate internal concern of, hey, the way you want to play him, if you put him back now this week, he's at a much higher chance of re-injury. It can't be, well, let's let him get a little bit stronger. Like, that can't be where we're at. It would have to be a legitimate area of re-injury risk is higher. Let's give him another week.
By the way, my buddy Jeff Canada says that he saw Weird Al Yankovic in concert in 1991. He was hilarious. Would it be like a stand-up routine or like an actual musical act?
I mean, you'd have to ask a first-hand source. I would assume it's a mix of both, right? I would assume there's comedy and stories in there mixed with the parody songs themselves. I don't know.
I mean, you just come out and watch the guy do a bunch of parody songs? That'd be kind of cool, I guess, right?
Is it worse than going to a casino to see Men at Work? I mean, honestly.
Oh, buddy, we're all in. I'm telling you. I mean, think about that. Like, we could probably go. I'm sure they got like a, Johnny Rockets there. Get ourselves a burger and a shake and watch Men at Work and drive home. Okay, one other thing here. Stephen Holder going to join us just a couple minutes. I'm in a need of radio plea here. You can't see this on the. So I have what I thought originally, like a year ago, I got what I thought was a spider bite on my leg.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. If it's still there for a year, I'd be worried.
Well, so I was like, I'm like, I need to go to the dermatologist because I don't think it's a spider bite. Like, it was honestly, like, I looked it up and then of course I'm like, oh my gosh, it's whatever. It went away. I have a dermatologist that I went to. It did go away, and the dermatologist was like, yeah, I don't think it's anything to be worried about. The exact same spot, the exact same look of a spider bite is back.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, this is recurring. There's no way that the same spider bit me in the same place twice, right? So I want to go get it looked at, but they can't get me in for like 3 more weeks, and I'm worried that it's going to go away again between now and when I'm actually able to go into the dermatologist.
Could you minute clinic it?
Are you sure it's not a flea bite?
It's in the exact same spot though, and there's like a little like white mark around it, almost like the flea would have like a. Have to have like a target,
or a
target
tick
that it left behind. But it's in the exact same spot, and it looks the exact same as it was
Could
before.
you go minute clinic? Would they be able to assess it all?
I don't know, because they're not do they have dermatologists at the minute clinic? Basically, what I'm getting at is, does anybody know a dermatologist that can get me in the next week?
Well, I don't.
I want to have it seen before it goes down.
But I would think, I have no idea. I would think, though, somewhere like a minute clinic or some quick see doctor would be able to identify spider bite or not, at least take that off the list.
I'm pleading right now on the air. If you know of a dermatologist and get me in, let me know. 523-9288. I'm very happy with my dermatologist. They just can't get me in for the next couple of weeks because obviously from 12 to 3 I'm unavailable.
Do you think if you walked in there in a panic, they'd be able to help you out?
You've
got to check out my leg now.
What if I limp? I'd have to limp in, right? Stephen Holder is not limping. He's walking, and he's walking right into this program, top of the hour on the other side. It is a Tuesday. That means the Colts, we will get better indication by tomorrow who's kind of in and out. They've made a couple of roster changes. They have some peculiarity in a couple of different areas. Joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line to talk about that and more from ESPN.com is Stephen Holder. Stephen, before we get to that, I'm going to ask you this question off the top. You are a native of Florida. We have discussed before on this program the fact that you have been down there during a hurricane situation. I believe that your parents are kind of out of the main, what appears to be, whatever they call it, the cone of where landfall is going to hit, et cetera. But just in terms of being a native Floridian, what is the anticipation, the mindset, the anxiety that comes with this recurrence now of another hurricane about to land in Florida?
Yeah, this is rough. So to be specific, I'm from South Florida, but I lived in Tampa for 8 years. So this hits close to home for me. And most people are not familiar with the topography of, if that's the word, of Tampa Bay. It is, if you look at it on a map, you have that peninsula of the St. Petersburg area, and then Tampa Bay on the other side of that, and in between is this huge body of water with a small opening into the Gulf of Mexico. So what they're worried about, and I don't mean to sound like the weather service here, but the reality of this is that water comes pushing through the Sunshine Parkway, the Sunshine Skyway, underneath that Skyway Bridge, that famous bridge. Well, that water comes pushing in there. It's only going one direction, and it's going to keep going until it stops, and it ain't going to stop at the shoreline. So it's caught in basically a bowl. So that's the concern. And I lived in Tampa for 8 years, as I said, and in all of that time, I don't ever remember being terrified about a hurricane, which is pretty remarkable because I lived it every year in South Florida. But for whatever reason, Tampa Bay has been spared a direct hit, as you might know now, for like 100 years. So no one who lives there has ever seen this. And I don't think appreciation for it as people on the east coast of Florida or even the southwest coast of Florida. So this is going to be a historic event, and people are going to die. It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad unless something that we can't foresee changes. It's going to be bad, and it's going to be something that area has not seen. And as I said, in more than a century, I don't want to even imagine, because 100 years ago, there were people living there.
Now, Stephen, the area itself, and again, hurricanes are unpredictable. I mean, we know that in terms of the path. Everybody obviously hoping that. But I thought I saw, and I don't know how much you paid attention to the latest. The latest that I saw was that, in fact, the historic atmospheric level that they were anticipating, that it has scaled back a little bit now, and we're looking at maybe like Category 3 as opposed to the force of the Category 5 that was anticipated. That's not to say that it's going to be, that it's not going to be bad. But am I correct in saying that it looks like it maybe is not with the same ferocity that was anticipated yesterday? Well,
that's true, but that doesn't really help when it comes to the storm surge. I mean, it helps. It's less, but the storm surge, even at Category 3, is going to be just devastating. To a couple of weeks ago, Hurricane Helene, which hit around the Tampa Bay area, or at least it pushed the storm surge in. I guess it was off the coast and hit further north. But the storm surge did a huge number on Tampa Bay.
And that's the rush of water that's coming in, right? When you say storm surge, you're talking about the wall of water that's coming in.
Water, correct.
And then correct. The problem, if I'm not mistaken, Stephen, and I'm from Indiana here, but is it's not even necessarily the force of the water coming in. It's then all of the water retreating at the same time and the gravity of it pulling everything back out, right?
Yeah, I mean, it like you won't see like Katrina level flooding, like where it's the water's just there days and days later. That's not what happens. That's not what tends to happen in Florida because it's, normal kind of a low-lying bowl. And
Correct.
I don't understand all the.
Yeah, the levee broke and then everything filled in, right?
Right. Because like if you saw what happened with Helene, the water came in, it flooded, and then by the end of the next day it was gone. But it doesn't have to stay there long to do the damage. So it will be difficult. And South Tampa is beautiful. It's where you see Davis Island, where Tom Brady had his home, which I think was at one point Derek Jeter's house, right there on Davis Island. Tampa General daughter was born. You might have seen pictures of that last week. That is just an extremely vulnerable area. I mean, it's basically the most expensive real estate in the entire region. So it's going to be rough, man.
Well, we hope for the best for certain. Okay, let's talk, Stephen, about what took place, speaking of Florida, in Jacksonville with the Colts.
Yep.
The thing we were just discussing, and let's get to this first. Hypothetically, well, let's say Joe Flacco goes another game, and let's say he plays really well and plays at the level that he did on Sunday and the Colts win. I won't even lead the witness here. Is it possible for the Colts to have a quarterback controversy between Joe Flacco and a healthy Anthony Richardson?
I don't think it is in their mind. It may be in the minds of some fans.
Yeah, I mean in their mind. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't anticipate that at all. And I think if you look at the Colts season, while Anthony Richardson at times could certainly have played better. Okay, he has 6 interceptions, and we can't just gloss over that. But he's not the reason they're 2-3. And I think that's what the Colts will come back to. He's given them chances to win. I mean, he would certainly like to have that performance back to the Packers, but truly, in the end of that game, I mean, he did give them opportunities despite his earlier miscues. The other thing I would say, and I hate to say this, I really, really hate to say this, but it's just true, and we have to keep it in mind. I'm not disparaging Joe Flacco, but please keep in mind, when I say please, I'm talking to listeners and fans, the Jacksonville Jaguars pass defense is absolute trash. They are number 32 against the pass in the NFL. And so the Colts did have a lot of success. Joe Flacco did play well. You cannot take that away from him. But I think when you compare the opponents that Anthony Richardson's played against, they're not even close. He played against the Houston Texans with guys like Derek Stingley in the secondary. Yeah, he played against the Green Bay Packers with Jair Alexander back there, with the Chicago Bears, who have just all kinds of talent on defense. The Steelers, he basically spotted Joe Flacco a 14-point lead against the number 1 defense in football at the time. So the opposition that Anthony Richardson has faced has been much more difficult than anything Joe Flacco was faced with on Sunday, even though the Jaguars played well. So that has to be factored in here, and I'm sure the Colts are taking that into consideration.
ESPN Stephen Holder is our guest. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Stephen, based on your time on the beat, the way this organization works, and as porous that they have been defensively, we've highlighted it in terms of the yardage they're giving up a game. They're, I think, 3rd in the National Football League in missed tackles, which, I mean, you could argue how much of that is Bradley, how much of that is just guys got to execute better, but there's been documented struggles for this team defensively. Based on your history on the beat and the way the organization works, what would it take for them? How cataclysmic would it have to be defensively in terms of lapses and struggles for them to let him go midseason?
Well, I think they'd have to keep losing for sure. If they overcome it, then I think you just write it out. But if you keep losing, and the defense is the reason you're losing, I do think at that point all bets are off. Look, there is a fair amount of frustration within the organization. I don't know that it's directed at Bradley specifically, but that defensive performance was described to me by people in the organization as just humiliating.
Well, because Eddie had a piece up, our own Eddie Garrison had a piece up on 1075thefan.com highlighting what has happened for like just career days, week after week, whether it's opposing quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, to a point that like embarrassing is a perfect word for it. And I imagine nobody in that building is happy about it, considering that point level. Chap said this yesterday, 34 is going to win you games in the National Football League. Like, your defense should be able to do enough to walk out of there with a W.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what actually, something that does not bode well for Gus Bradley and his future is that they have a lot of investment on defense. You know, whether you like the players or not is irrelevant, but people generally, whether you like the players or not, you know, that's up to the beholder. But they have invested in that defense, you know, pretty substantially. Now, I get it. They didn't do it in the secondary, and that has proven to be a mistake. Okay, we knew that. But that being said, that front seven is very, very expensive and has a lot of top draft picks, or at least high draft picks. And so they're expecting results. The funny thing about it is that right now the offense is certainly more than acquitting itself when certainly there's offensive investment on the offensive line, but outside of that, you know, they have a lot of maybe younger guys and lower profile guys that are contributing well on offense. They're not getting that on defense, where there's investment, like I said, heavy investment both in draft picks and in money in that front seven. Injuries are a factor, and we cannot emphasize this enough. I knew that at some point this attrition would catch up to them. It has caught up to them, but it has to get dramatically better when these guys get back. It can't just be a bump. It has to be dramatically better, because this is unacceptable.
Does the availability of a formerly effective defensive coordinator who just lost his job as a head coach in the NFL impact or change in any way the patience the Colts have in getting their defense turned around?
Well, that would assume that coach, I think his name is Robert Saleh.
Correct.
He's a very good defensive coordinator. By the way, if you look at my Twitter, I posted the Jets' current defensive statistics. They're not bad, okay? Let me be clear. They're amazing, in fact. So that's a whole other story. But anyway, Robert Saleh is very, very, very elite. He's proven that. But I think that question would assume that he wants to continue coaching this season. The early information that I've seen suggests that he's probably going to take a seat and just ride it out the rest of the year. He's going to get paid, obviously. He can regroup in the next hiring cycle and see where he's at. That's what I'd expect to do. I don't think it really has any effect on what the Colts do in the if they make a change at defense coordinator after the season or at some point. Do you call Robert Saleh? I would hope you do. But, you know, I don't want to put the cart before the horse. But certainly he'll be in demand. There's no question about that. But I just don't think it impacts anything right now, because I don't think he's going to take on another job right now.
Is there, Stephen, any way to know at this point, you know, where do we stand in terms of knowledge of, expectation of the health of Anthony Richardson and his availability?
Well, I talked to him after the game, and the impression I got from Anthony is that he was not disappointed in the fact that he did not play. I mean, did he want to play? Yes. Should he have played? He actually did not make that argument and said, you know, he maybe should not have been out there. He actually acquiesced and said that. So there were all the number one. Number two, he felt extremely confident that he'd play against Tennessee. He's made a lot of progress, but maybe just wasn't quite there. And I think the problem is not whether he could play. I think he could have played under different circumstances, like, say, you don't have Joe Flacco. But the question then became, could he play like Anthony Richardson? And the answer to that was more likely no. All around, it was the right decision. And whether he can be that guy on this coming Sunday is much more likely. So I do think there's a good chance. I mean, look, ultimately, he did at least practice last week on a limited basis. So he was able to move around. The question is, again, was he able to move effectively like we're used to him doing? And that was no. So let's see what happens with a few more days when he gets back out there. Maybe he's got a shot.
With us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line is Stephen Holder, Colts beat writer for ESPN.com. Stephen, whenever I look at rookie wide receivers around the National Football League, regardless of system, I always think there's going to be a learning curve. You need to be careful with how you judge wide receivers. Most notably for me, I was pretty critical of Alec Pierce the last couple of seasons, and those that said, no, he just needs to be given opportunities to go high point the ball and go get it on deep shots with the right quarterback, they were right. He's having, in exceptional years, living proof that rookie wide receivers, they take time to mold and develop. What's happening with A.D. Mitchell, where it appears at times that business decisions have been made, has been the word that's used, on routes or avoiding contact. And I know that Shane Steichen addressed that the other day and said that no, he didn't think that was happening, but there's just stuff that they need to work on with him. What are you seeing, and how unique is this aspect of effort level or adjusting to life in the NFL compared to other rookie wideouts for A.D. Mitchell, and is it a problem?
Oh, it's a problem. It's absolutely a problem. I would say, to your point about Alec Pierce, I think these situations could not be more different, because Alec Pierce, it was an opportunity issue, I think. Look, he did have some drops early, and it kind of stained him or their images of him. And that can happen. It just kind of sticks with you, whether it's overblown or not. And so I think that happened. But, I mean, he was doing what was asked of him. He was going and getting down the field and winning his matchups. He just wasn't getting the football. And that's on the quarterback. That's on the coach. That's on other people besides the player himself. Here, what I think we have is Mitchell is opportunities. In fact, this is, I think, one of the most remarkable stats of any with the Colts right now, is that Mitchell has more targets than Alec Pierce, who leads the entire NFL in yards per catch, 28.3 yards per catch. That is historic after 5 seasons. I'm actually running the numbers now. I can't find a guy in the last 10 years who's come close after 5 games. Okay? That's what we're talking about here. And yet, A.D. Mitchell has more targets right now than Pierce, because of the nature of Pierce's game, which is deep shots, which you just don't get to dial up that often. So that's part of it. Anyway, as it relates to Mitchell specifically, he has to look. You have to embrace the physicality, and right now he's avoiding it. I don't know how else to put it, and that's why I think this is concerning. It's not a matter of he's not understanding the offense or the concepts, or he's messing up on the routes. In fact, he's doing really well at those things. His routes are spectacular. Okay, he wins all the time. It's unbelievable. He is leaving corners in the dust. And then when it comes time to go get the football, he is not attacking the football at all. And I'm sorry, I just think that if you are a football purist, that has to drive you maybe that, because
is that
it is
fixable?
driving me crazy.
Is that fixable? And if it is it fixable in the short term?
Right. I hope. I mean, it's not something that I think we see that often. That's why it's hard to say. Usually the problems are what I outlined. The guy's running the wrong route, or the wrong depth, or he's in the wrong
drops,
place.
Dropping it left and right.
Drops.
Right.
Right. That's none of those things are issue here. Some of those issues, certainly, where he hasn't been able to connect with the quarterbacks because maybe he was overthrown, or he maybe ran the route at a wrong distance or angle. But that's okay. I can live with that. You know what I mean? He's a good enough player that you have to try to get him the football, because something good could happen. That is understandable. And if you miss it, you miss it. But I think when you show, or when you perhaps have a indication that he's avoiding contact, well, I think that just makes you reevaluate everything. And I just don't know. I mean, if you're the Colts, this has to color how you factor him into to games moving forward. They gave him probably more opportunities than he's had the entire season this past Sunday, and to have that be the takeaway that he's avoiding contact. I mean, that speaks to the obvious nature of the problem. So I don't know what to do with it, and I don't know how you coach a guy out of it. People who get paid more than me have to figure that out right now.
Stephen, at the beginning of the season, Chris Ballard essentially, and he owned this, I mean, he basically said, I think he knew that he was taking a potential roll of the dice on his young defensive backfield, not having necessarily the depth or the experience there, but one player in Kenny Moore that was experienced, but that he was going to roll the dice with it. Is it too early in the season to say whether or not that came up bust?
I think it came up bust in at least one regard. So they were counting on Nick Cross and Jalen Johnson, or Joe, excuse me, and they actually have come through. I think they've played well. It doesn't show up in the numbers. I get it, but certainly they have outperformed expectations. Those two guys, where Chris Ballard swung and missed, if you will, in the depth. He thought that they could move forward with the existing depth that they had. They also drafted some defensive backs. Those guys have not really been a factor. In one case, the guy's not even here. So that, I think, is where I have the biggest problem was if you're going to go young with that starting group, outside of Kenny Moore and maybe Julian Black, and you maybe need to have some experience behind those young up-and-coming guys. I mean, Juju Brents is the other one that we can't forget. I mean, I still don't know whether Juju is truly going to be a legit player, a legit starter in this league. We don't have enough evidence to
I like his size and athleticism, though.
Right, I do too. But all I'm saying is his injury history had to give you pause counting on him, and you can count on him as long as you have depth behind him, right? So I think the depth is where I have the biggest issue. Now, no one has Pro Bowlers sitting on the bench. Okay, that is true. But you can do better than just saying, all right, well, we'll just roll out the same journeyman who nobody else wanted. And that's where I have an issue. You could have gotten some sort of experience back there, some kind of quality depth, and they did not.
Stephen, we certainly hope the best for your home state of Florida and for everybody that you know that is down in the Tampa area as well. We will also, of course, be reading your coverage for the Colts at ESPN.com and appreciate the time, as always, on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. We will talk to you soon, Stephen. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Stephen Holder of ESPN.com joining us. On the other side, we have breaking news. Much anticipated breaking news, including a big name in the NFL. I'll tell you next. You've probably heard the spots for it. Spots is a radio jargon, sorry. Ads, whatever you want to call it. The mentions of the upcoming film about the life of Brian Clausen, the extraordinary life of Brian Clausen, who was a USAC legend, still is a USAC legend. In 2016, he was aiming to run 200 races. That quest fell short because he was fatally injured while racing, and his family was unaware of the fact that he had signed up to become an organ donor. His selfless decision to do so saved the lives of 5 different people. I've actually been to the Indiana Donor Network over on the northwest side of town and seen their incredible facility, the compassion with which they treat and handle. I saw the entire process of how it happens when one goes in and they get the phone call that a potential donor is in the hospital. Those that believe that by being a donor, you increase, if you will, the odds that the hospital will facilitate for that. I can tell you I'm living proof of the fact that that urban legend is false, because I'm a donor and went through a process where they were made aware of the fact that I was in the hospital. But a life about Brian Clausen's, or a movie, about Brian Clausen's life is going to be premiered at the Tobias Theater in Clues Memorial Hall on the Butler campus coming up on the 12th of October. That is this Saturday, I believe, at 6:30. There's a Q&A afterwards with the filmmakers that I am happy to and honored to say that I'll be helping moderate. But we will have tickets for that premiere coming up here in just a little bit on the program. Their goal is to get that sold out because it's part of the Heartland Film Festival, and they're trying to get this picked up for a national release so that people nationwide can see the story of Brian Clausen. So that is the goal for the venture on Saturday. Tickets to give away, we will do that coming up in just a little bit. But, Eddie, do you have the breaking news sounder by chance? Thank you. It was highly anticipated, and we have been waiting for a while to see when this could happen. But we have a major blockbuster trade in the Query & Company Fantasy Football League. When our auto draft took place, I was the only that did the auto draft because I actually do take my job seriously. And when you guys set up for the draft to take place from 12 until 3, I set mine on auto draft. That allowed me to get not 1, not 2, but 3 quarterbacks.
Yep.
I have been actively shopping C.J. Stroud. And my team, because of the way the auto draft fell, I was very short and void of talent in a couple of different areas. I think I've done a pretty decent job of getting crafty in the free agency wires and a couple of trades to try to bolster my lineup. But we can now officially say, because the trade was approved by myself, C.J. Stroud is on his way to Jimmy Cook's team, that's just the doormat of the league.
Indeed.
Eddie, I would like for you,
but
Eddie Garrison, to assess or grade who got the better end of this trade. I have on my roster Josh Allen and Anthony Richardson. I realize I might be taking a risk short term because both of them may not be available this week. We shall see. But I am sending C.J. Stroud to Jimmy in exchange for Terry McLaurin.
I think it's a good trade for both parties here. It addresses a need of Jimmy's team. It addresses a need of your team, but it hurts the depth of Jimmy's team.
Okay. Well, there you go.
I want to. I'm not being flippant here, by the way.
I have 3 running backs that are all, by the way, on IR, just so you know.
I'm not being flippant here, by the way. Trading in fantasy football is difficult because each owner tends to over-evaluate their players or want to be the one that gets one over on the other owner. It's fair that happens in all walks of professional sports, but this is the best, closest we'll get to it. I will commend Jake. That was the easy-going negotiation for trading that I've had in a long time.
Well, you countered because I originally I can't remember who I originally asked for.
You offered Anthony Richardson for Terry McLaurin, and I did not want Richardson because I, like many Colts fans, worry about his health, and that just doesn't do anything for me if he gets hurt. It's the NFL, so it could happen to Stroud too, but then I countered with, hey, how about Stroud instead, and that was where things went. So I think it's an amicable move. I'm in desperate waters at 1-4 in the bottom of the league, 5% chance to make the playoffs, but now there's a quarterback on team to be named later.
So my receiver room, now nobody cares, but I'll tell you anyway. Drake London, I have
you
on
got
my
for
roster.
Pat Fryermuth. Oh my goodness.
What's that?
You got him for Pat Fryermuth.
That was a fabulous deal. Jaden Reed, I have. I have Xavier Leggett from, am I saying that correctly, from Carolina, who's kind of a throwaway. Tyreek Hill, who has not had a great year so far. And now Terry McLaurin. That's my receiver.
In regards to team to be named later from a wide receiver standpoint, still Marvin Harrison Jr., still Zay Flowers, still Chris Godwin, Brian Thomas Jr. on the bench, Jackson Smith and Jigma on the bench, and then a big pickup for a team to be named later. Devontae Adams recently joining the ranks here, so we'll see if he finds a new home.
That's good. So you're full of
helps my
knuckleheads.
depth. Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So.
Okay, there's also a free agency, if you will, that could be done, a free agency move the Indianapolis Colts could make, and that is because, Jimmy, and this is going to be a talking point, I have a feeling probably for a while now, there's a big, big, big name in terms of a defensive coach in the National Football League that is available, and there are many within the Indianapolis Colts area, and by that I mean media and fans. I don't know about front office personnel at this point, but the Colts defense is obviously reeling. It is obviously, I'm not going to say from the coordinator standpoint, it's not fair of me to call for someone's job, but the reality is that they are in need of some sort of a shakeup, whether it be schematic, whether it be personal, I don't know. But Gus Bradley, I don't know if Chris Ballard and Jim Irsay see his seat and Shane Steichen see Gus Bradley's seat as being warm, but the perception is that at some point they're going to have to make a move here, and now there is a guy available who has been one of the better defensive minds in the NFL in the last handful of years.
Yeah, Robert Saleh now fresh on the market after the Jets fired him abruptly today.
Saleh.
There's conflicting reports as to how this happened. I mean, I understand it's a dark business in the National Football League at times, but like that he showed up today at the Jets complex and they just said, "Hey, sorry, you're out of here." Didn't get an opportunity to. I can't remember who had the report, but didn't get an opportunity to go talk to the players. Like was just escorted out. So it happens fast in the National Football League. In that same vein for the Colts, you look at and I highlighted this earlier, but shout out to our producer Eddie Garrison, who does a great job in a lot of different lanes, but especially on the website on 1075thefan.com. He highlighted on a nice piece yesterday about how many different players, be it quarterbacks, running backs, etc., have had either career days or season high days against this Colts defense. And as Stephen Holder brought up, there are pieces to this defense you're not going to be able to easily move on from. There's some contracts on this roster that are going to be there for the foreseeable future. So if you're the Colts and you're looking at where this season is and the long term, I would at least call Saleh. There's been some reports that he might want to just wait till the hiring cycle, let his kids finish out their schooling. He's obviously based in New York as the head coach of the Jets right now. But if he's open to it, make a call and see where he's at. And if Robert Saleh today said, yes, I'd love to be the defensive coordinator for the Colts, I would make that switch in a heartbeat. Because I don't want to get to a point next year where there could be tons of defensive coordinator openings and he's going to have his pick of the litter. Like, I don't know what happens in San Francisco, but that would make sense for a reunion if there was a change out there. Or if you're, I'm not going to throw to put more people on the chopping block like another franchise that would need a DC, but there are going to be job opportunities in the coaching cycle next year. Try to pounce on it now and at least make a phone call to see if he has any interest in it or if he wants to keep his options at eye level and wait until the offseason. But I think it's worth a phone call. I mean, wouldn't you? I know you went through the hiring resume with Eddie Garrison earlier.
That's
but
right. No, you didn't.
But sorry, it was with Robert Saleh. That's on me.
Saleh.
I apologize. That's the name he uses for his non-football coaching occupation. He changes it when he's a football coach. But I mean, based on the resume and what he's done, especially in San Francisco, wouldn't you put a flyer out there?
Look, of course you would. Now, here's the thing. This just recently reported by Michael Silver. Thank you to Greg for sending this along to me. He says he plans to regroup, go on vacation with his family. What's that?
This is what I was referencing. I didn't give but yes, go ahead.
Prepare for the hiring cycle, but he would not be interested in coaching for the rest of this season. I get that, but yes, you are correct. If the right offer comes along, you throw it at him, right?
Yeah, I didn't see it from...
Take the flyer, right?
And I'm not trying to disparage that writer because I'd seen the same tweet, because I hadn't seen that in the reporting from the national guys like your Rappaports or your Schefters, I did not put it in the realm of definitive that Saleh would be not wanting a job right now, but I did see that tweet, and it would make a lot of sense. You're not wanting to uproot your family and change things. Maybe you wait it out.
What a dream that'd be. Like, I got like a $3 million golden parachute. I'm just going to go to Aruba for a while or, somewhere. Obviously, I realize tropical areas right now are a little bit dicey, but you get what I'm saying. Okay, by the way, I misspoke, and I totally apologize. I was thinking of a Heartland Film Festival film that I had done or been a part of a couple of weeks ago that was at Clues. The Tobias Theater is in Newfields. So that's where the Brian Clausen film is going to be this Saturday night. The Tobias Theater at Newfields. We have tickets to give away for this. Tickets are available at driven2savelives.org, but we have tickets to give away. We will do it on the other side. Are we doing show trivia for this, Eddie, or you are the CEO? In what fashion would you like to give away said tickets?
We'll decide during the break.
Okay, we will do that on the other side. But I would love for you folks to be able to go to the Heartland Film Festival world premiere of the Brian Clausen film this Saturday at the Tobias Theater at Newfields, and we will give away tickets for that next. Now, do you think that Shannon will be more surprised / not offended, but like taken aback by the fact that I'm telling her that we're going for a 3.5-hour drive because we're going to see Men at Work or because we're going to a casino? Like, which one do you think is like a casino in Illinois? I mean, it's
look,
not like we're going to Vegas here, right?
I don't have anything against Men at Work, so I would say the casino side of it, because it's not like you're headed like, hey, they're like you mentioned, it's not like they're playing at the Bellagio. Like, I think that element of it is what changes it for me if I was in Shannon's shoes. But then I would just, know that I was hanging out with Jake and be like, oh, everything's fine now, So it all
that's
sets
right.
things.
Gosh.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you.
No problem. Glad I could help.
I'm telling you, Men at Work, to see Men at Work would be awesome. And most people think of their best hit as Down Under, which is, for sentimental reasons, I always say is my favorite song of all time. But my favorite song from Men at Work is actually It's a Mistake, which had one of the great music videos of all time because they used, like, G.I. Joe figures. Who can't like that, right?
G.I. Joes.
That's right.
Do you think they were pandering? Think they knew the popularity of focus groups, said, hey, man, people love G.I. Joes.
That's right.
And they used it?
You used well, I mean, I was like 10 at the time, so of course I thought it was awesome. So the Driven to Save Lives racing onto the big screen, the movie that tells the story of Brian Clausen, part of the Heartland Film Festival. The world premiere of it is going to be this Saturday at Newfields, the Tobias Theater. It is at 6:30. There is a Q&A with the filmmakers at 8. We have tickets to give away. 239-1070 is the telephone number. We have how many tickets to give away here, Eddie?
We have a pair.
We have a pair to give away right now, right?
Yes.
Are we just giving them away, or are we doing show trivia? In what form or fashion would you, Eddie Garrison, as the CEO of Query & Company, like to give said tickets away?
I was thinking about this during the break, and I was like, you know what? We want people to be aware of the Brian Clausen story, so we don't want to make it hard on them. So
that's fair.
A lucky number, and then get to know your listener.
Okay. I will let you select the number, Jimmy Cook. What number would you like to go with?
4.
Okay. Caller number 4 would be who, Eddie?
Dennis.
Dennis. Is this Dennis the Menace by chance?
It is Dennis the Menace.
Dennis, I believe you've called the program before. We've played Get to Know Your Listener with you before, correct?
I believe we have, sir.
Okay, Dennis, I would like to know this, though, before we get to getting you to go see the film, and I appreciate your interest in it. I think that you will find it to be a compelling story and a compelling film. I'm curious of this, though. Strictly, we're going to do a little market research with you. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Dennis, were you last night, you don't work like nights, right? Were you home last night, let's say, during the primetime hours of, 7 to midnight?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Did you watch, without saying what it is, did you watch sports last night by any chance?
I did.
Okay. Did you find yourself leaning more towards, did you go A, strictly the NFL game, B, one of the Major League Baseball playoff games, or C, oscillating back and forth with the remote?
I was definitely channel surfing, but I watched more of the baseball than the football.
Interesting.
Hell
okay.
yes.
Yes,
Dennis.
and who is your team, Dennis?
My team is the New York Mets. Reason being, when I was 8 years old, that was the very first professional baseball game I saw. We were living in New Jersey at the time. My dad was a carpenter. We traveled with him in the summertime, and he took me to Shea Stadium.
Okay, and so you've always been you're a lifelong Mets fan then, is that correct?
That is correct.
And with that, Dennis, and by the way, this is just for Dennis here. If you can fire up my computer here, Eddie.
You are
Dennis
the
probably
man.
can't hear that, but it's fabulous. The Meet the Mets song, Dennis, which I'm sure you have as a ringtone on your phone. Your favorite all-time Met, Dennis, would be who?
That would be Tom Seaver.
Tommy, terrific. All right, fair enough. Okay, so Dennis, here's the deal. Saturday evening, 6:30, Brian Clausen's story is an amazing one. You heard me mention it. He was a prolific race car driver. My favorite trivia question of all time about Brian Clausen is, aside from the fact that when he would win races, he would simply send a tweet that that said, parked it. But he was the leader of the 100th lap of the 100th running of the Indianapolis 500-mile race. Unfortunately, that was in the same year where he was fatally injured, but he lives on through organ donation, That story and more will be coming up on Saturday at Newfields at the Tobias Theater. And Dennis, I'll be there doing the Q&A, and I want you to come up either before or after. If you recognize me, I don't know. I'll be the tall guy there with the Outkicked My Coverage companion. And come up and certainly tell me that you are Dennis the Menace, and we can check the Mets score then. All right?
Sounds good, and this is for you, Jake.
Yes! All right, yes. Attaboy, Dennis. We'll get your information here. Eddie will get you on hold, and we'll get your information and get you out. Okay, so last night you did watch the games, right, Jimmy?
I did indeed,
Along with
yes.
Dennis.
Which was the primary screen for you, Jimmy?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Those that don't know, a Chiefs and a Yankees fan. I went to my brother's house yesterday, who started the whole Chiefs fan, and we've talked about that in the past 4.
So
Shout
at any
Thanks
point
for calling me back. Glad I wasn't, in need of you yesterday.
I called you back twice.
Were you
I
tempted
did
to
not
be a
get him.
Royals fan when you were a kid because of your Kansas City fandom?
No, again, so I don't want to waste the showtime on revisiting this. My brother was a Chiefs fan before the Colts came to town, and my dad was a lifelong Yankees fan. So that's where the fandoms cross ways. There never was tempted. Don't have anything against the Royals by any means. But anyway, my brother always hosts Chiefs games at his house on the South Side. Shout out Brother Bob. So Chiefs were on the main screen. I had Yankees and Royals on the iPad. So
my only thing, and I said this earlier, but I am curious if I'm alone in this or if others feel the same. And I'm a little bit hesitant to bring it up, even though I did earlier, but to go back to it because, it's I'm a broadcaster, a sportscaster. I started my career in St. Louis. So I certainly know of and respect and have had on this, not on this program, but on this radio station, Bob Costas, who's been really good to Kevin in the morning show and was a great guest. He is a legendary broadcaster.
Undoubtedly.
And is still, in my opinion, in terms of being a studio host or like during the Olympics, filling time and navigating you through from one sport to the next to the next. I mean, Tarico's obviously excellent at this as well.
Mm-hmm.
I always, truth be told, even though I realize that he is as smug as can be, I always really liked Bryant Gumbel in that role. I thought he was just smooth and just unflappable. Costas is absolutely in that category. His wealth of knowledge of sport is impressive. His ability and just his articulation, he's one of the great speakers of all time. No doubt about it.
You think about all the college football opens, like NBC,
correct,
down Main Street. Like, just deliveries
I've
to
just
the roof.
never thought that that his skill set was play-by-play. But last night in watching, so there was that precursor going in. Even if we're talking about 30 years ago, I just didn't think that in the, like when you played Trivial Pursuit and you had the little pegs of all the different colors. Everybody had that one color that they avoided like the plague. For me, it was the like, I think it was green. It was like science and nature. For Bob Costas, in the wheel of his Trivial Pursuit thing, the slice of the pie that I just have always thought was his weakness was play-by-play. But what he fell into last night was he sounded bored.
Yeah.
And it was like baseball. I mean, there's a drama that goes into October baseball. There's, especially at Yankee Stadium and the Yankees and the Royals and, David and Goliath. And, there's so much that goes into it. And not only did he sound bored, but it almost sounded like he thought he was just doing a podcast about the history of baseball. And instead of like getting analysis or getting me up to speed on what's happening in the game, I'm hearing stories about kind of obscure players from the 1961, 3-game set that took place at Yankee Stadium. And then he sounded dejected at times when things did not go the way of the Yankees. I just thought for that moment and that stage, it deserved more excitement and dedication to what was going on.
I'm not going to get into the direct aspect of like fan aspects because there were times in game one where I feel like Costas is inherently like just against New York, but that's a whole different concept. I know the clip you're talking about.
But he's a New Yorker.
No, I know the clip you're talking about. My larger complaint with him is, and you mentioned this about Al Michaels, if you want to say there was a day where play-by-play was his wheelhouse, he's lost his fastball to the point that you put on any other postseason broadcast, it's like watching a different sport.
Yeah,
Brian Anderson yesterday, and I know it was a go-ahead homer off Emmanuel Clase, but it sounds like the October you're used to, and then you hear Costas and it's just like you're watching golf.
I was going to say, this is what it sounded like. Jazz Chisholm in the top of the 9th inning leads it off with a solo homer.
Chisholm with a drive to very deep right. Forget about it. This one's going to leave the yard.
It's not terrible.
That one, admittedly, that one was slightly better than what he had all night, but whole body of work, it's a tough listen.
It sounded like I was literally, as I was watching the game, I thought to myself, I feel like I'm listening to a historical book reading at Nora Library.
Yep.
That's just what it sounded like. Alex Golden, by the way, joins us next. Yeah, hang on, Shannon. Let me listen to this song, and then we can go play the slots here in a second.
I like to imagine you just giving Shannon, here, take this money. You go play the slots. I'm staying with Ben at work.
That's right. No, listen, they got Down Unders coming up for the encore. I know it is. I realize we got a 3.5-hour drive home, and we're in a casino right now in a strip mall. But I'm telling you, I wanted to see Men at Work. The tickets are like, it's sold out. It's sold out. And then I've got to go secondary market for it.
Do you imagine that there's going to be a high, I mean, I have no idea genuinely, but secondary demand, you think they'll be arm and a leg?
Well, Colin Hay's a pretty respected musician, and so he just got done doing the tour with the Ringo Starr All-Star Band.
Depending on the casino, you bring an oxygen tank there, you might be able to barter.
Listen, I got a carton here of Salem 110s for anybody that's willing to go ahead and swap me some tickets. I got a card that's got 3 poles that comes with it on the 777s. Alex Golden joins us now, and I'm sure is thrilled to be doing so on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Pacers in action tonight, preseason, taking on the Hawks of Atlanta. Rick Carlisle this morning on the wake-up call with KB and Andy said not a lot of surprises that will be taking place in terms of the roster, although no Johnny Furphy and no Isaiah Jackson. They will not play tonight. The game can be seen on NBA TV. Alex joins us now. Alex, I am very intrigued by this. Without Isaiah Jackson playing, perhaps that means a little bit of extended time to see what James Wiseman can do. Am I the only that's intrigued by the former lottery pick that now joins the Pacers?
No, I think there's a lot of fans that are really intrigued. Anything I post about James Wiseman on social media seems to get the most reaction right now. Maybe it's just because he's a new face, but I think there's a lot of people excited about what James Wiseman can do. He's long. Miles Turner had a ton of praise for him, and I just think that when you look at a guy that was drafted second overall, you just see the potential, and I think he still, has a lot of potential. I don't know if he'll ever reach the expectations of number 2 overall in the NBA draft and become like a superstar, but I do think that he can still be a very serviceable player. So people are really excited about him, and I can see why. I would say the media member I know that's probably the most excited about him is Mark Monteith, very active on Twitter talking about him. So I think James Wiseman, though, it's going to be cool to see his story kind of unfold here in Indiana just as he continues to grow.
Alex, I'm just going almost off of like perception. I'm not saying it's even reality, but when I think of James Wiseman, I actually do kind of think of a skill set that is similar to that of Isaiah Jackson. And by that, I mean a bigger body, but a very athletic above rim type body that's where you want to take advantage of what he can bring to the table. But am I totally off in terms of what he does?
No, I mean, I think Isaiah is probably a better perimeter defender in terms of switching on to quicker guards and things like that. I mean, last year in the playoffs, there was one play where Isaiah Jackson got switched on to Jason Tatum and he blocked his jump shot. So I think that Wiseman's probably not as quick in terms of moving his feet that way, but I think that James probably has more of a jump shot. We saw a little bit of that during the scrimmage game on Sunday at Fan Jam, where he was able to hit, about a 20-footer, and it looked pretty natural, where I think Isaiah is still trying to figure out what he's going to do with his shot. I think he's been working on it with Coach Ginny Busek, and we know she's kind of the one that transformed T.J. McConnell's shot. She changed an Nembhard shot last year, so I'm hoping that Jackson kind of grow from that. But with Wiseman, I just think that he's massive. He's the biggest guy on the team. Like, standing next to Miles Turner, he's taller than Miles, and I think that it kind of just shows you just how massive this guy is with his wingspan too. So, but I mean, he's very similar in terms of playing above the rim, rebounding like Isaiah Jackson, blocking shots. So I see the similarities.
Alex Golden is our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. You can find his work, of course, at Alex Golden NBA and host of Setting the Pace podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Alex, this team, regardless of where rotation winds up figuring out and if there's any controversy throughout the season of who should start and who shouldn't, just brass tacks for numbers for them. We know how efficient they were from a scoring standpoint, 123 points per game, a figure we hadn't seen in about really since the 80s. And then from a defensive standpoint, 27th in the league in scoring defense, about 120 points per, though it did get better in the playoffs and towards the back end of the regular season. When you hear those two numbers, how much room for improvement on the defensive side and regression on the offensive side is there going into this season without drastically changing the starting rotation?
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be much regression in terms of the offensive side of things. I still think they want to play fast. They're going to get up and down the court, and they're going to score a lot of points. I think that's kind of just in their MO, especially if Tyrese is going to be fully healthy coming into the season. They'll be playing more through him and less through Pascal Siakam, which they did a lot during the playoffs. So I think they're going to continue to play fast. They're not going to change that. defensively, I do think that adding Pascal for the full 82-game season is going to help them. And they also have Nembhard and Neesmith in there now full-time compared to the rotation of guys they had in there last year, whether it was Bruce Brown, Buddy Hield, Benedict Mathurin, and the starting five. That starting five that played last year, they in the playoffs, they still have room to grow as a defensive unit, specifically Tyrese Halliburton as well as, just an on-ball defender, but he's still a pretty smart team defender in knowing what teams are going to run. So I think their defense can improve. I think Rick Carlisle, made a great point at one of the practices talking about their hope is to kind of develop Mathurin and Jarris into better defenders and kind of take some of that load off of Neesmith and Nembhard throughout the 82-game regular season. But I think they can probably stick around 18 where they finish that second half of the season at defensively, maybe get close to 15. I don't know if that's asking too much, but I think around 17, 18 is a good spot for them defensively. And if they can still be a top-tier offense, which I think they will be, that to me is a recipe for success. And I know they want to get better defensively, but I do think that with how fast they play, they're just going to give up a lot of points because there's going to be more possessions in their games compared to other games.
You hear all the time about teams flipping a proverbial switch, and perhaps we could make the argument that happened. The defensive tenacity was at the level it was supposed to be when the playoffs arrived, where all year it felt like Rick Carlisle was just preaching, man, if we can just get, like you outlined, middle of the pack, 15th or 17th around the league, they'd be good. From that standpoint of getting, is it feasible to see playoff level defense from them, like that level of effort on a nightly basis during the regular season? Or is their style of play, especially the pace at which they play, asking too much for them not to break at some point after 82 games, giving that much effort on both ends?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you kind of have to tamper expectations just a little bit because, everybody does ramp it up come playoff time. So I wouldn't say I expect it for the full 82-game season, but they've talked so much about their depth that I do think that they can play a much more physical style. And we've heard Rick Carlisle talk about how the league is going to change the way they're officiating games from less of the freedom of movement, more into the FIBA rules where there is a little bit more physicality allowed. And we saw that happen in that second half of the season, stuff that was being called after All-Star break, before All-Star break wasn't being called after All-Star break. So I think for a guy like Aaron Neesmith, this is a guy that's a very physical defender. It's going to benefit him from getting into foul trouble like he had issues in the previous years during the freedom of movement type of officiating. So with them implementing that rule in the NBA, I think it's just going to allow for a more physical brand of basketball. And I do know that the Pacers really wanted to implement more of their full court pressure that they put into the playoffs. I don't know how many times they'll run full court defense during the regular season, but I do think they're going to try to do it often and wear teams out. So that's something that they have. That's a strength of theirs because of their depth and because of their conditioning, that they get themselves ready for this type of run and this type of running and having to have that much endurance. So, yeah, I do think that they're going to be okay on that end. It's just they just have to continue to grow internally. And I think that for the playoff level, like you're going to see it intensify just even more because everybody does that. But I think it'll be pretty close. I'd say about 75-80% of what they showed intensity-wise during the playoffs is probably what you get on average for the regular season.
Offensively, what player for the Pacers do you feel, Alex, we discussed this earlier, but what player do you feel most benefits from, or let me rephrase that, if teams are guarding more physically, what player for the Pacers offensively is the most conditioned to be able to score through contact?
Yeah, I think a lot of people would probably say Mathurin, just because of his physicality, and I think it's going to help him get to the free throw line a little bit more. We didn't see him have the same amount of free throws attempted last season as he had his rookie season. But I think somebody else who really does a good job embracing contact offensively is a guy like Andrew Nembhard. Andrew Nembhard, to me, is somebody that can embrace that physicality, hit his jump shot. I think he did a great job in the playoffs really developing his game. He was probably the most impressive player during the Fan Jam with his ability to just score in different varieties. And the last person I would throw in this group as well, I think that Pascal is going to be fine with the physicality as well, just because he kind of likes that back to the basket game at times, spot up at the elbow, and he can create fouls too. So I think that those three would be my offensive players that I think are going to embrace it the most. I think they make the most sense. But Mathurin to me is probably the most intriguing just because we saw what he could do when he was able to get to the free throw line, how much more that opened up his game. And now it's just a matter of him kind of rehabbing from that injury. How much contact does he look for when he's driving? Could that hinder him a little bit in terms of trying not to get injured again? Is it just going to be a mental thing? So I'm just kind of monitoring that. But I think there's a handful of guys that actually will benefit from the physicality.
Alex Goldenham setting the pace with us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Alex, you brought up earlier Pascal Siakam last season and him obviously coming around the time of the All-Star break, not having a full season to get acclimated to life with Rick Carlisle, life with the Pacers. Started to come on strong in the postseason. With this roster, with Siakam, with Halliburton, Nembhard, Nesmith, Turner, etc., is the time for growing pains over for this unit based on the fact that they had all of the second half of last season to work together, or are you anticipating still some things that need ironed out with the full potential of that starting five?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that it's still a little bit to be determined because we didn't see Halliburton fully healthy. I think that's the main thing here. We haven't seen Halliburton at his peak with Pascal. So I think there is still room for improvement. I think that Miles is who Miles is. I think that him and Pascal fit well. I think Nesmith, I think he just kind of is who he is too, and that's not a bad thing. It's just he's a 3-and-D type of player that'll put the ball on the floor occasionally. And I think Nembhard still has room to grow. I just really believe in Nembhard's game overall. I think playing with Team Canada, getting the experience to making it to the Eastern Conference Finals is going to help him a lot and just kind of help, him realize the player that he can become on this team. So I think with that starting five, they didn't reach their apex last year, and I think there's still plenty of room to grow. But in terms of how much, I don't know. I think that they could take another step. Just getting that continuity, getting more reps together, it's going to help. And just knowing where people are in the right spots at the right time and different plays and different actions they want to throw into that could maybe get them better looks as well could also, elevate this offense. So I'm very intrigued, though, by the Halliburton fully healthy and what that looks like and how they kind of utilize what we saw, last year during the in-season tournament run with a healthy Pascal Siakam as well.
It all begins tonight in terms of the preseason for the Pacers taking on Atlanta in Atlanta. You can see that game on NBA TV. Alex Golden has been with us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Setting the Pace is the podcast where you can hear Alex over the course of the year breaking down the Pacers. And then, of course, we will have him on this program for the better part of the season as well. Alex, appreciate the time as always, and we'll talk to you soon, all right?
Yeah, I appreciate it. And real quick, I know my buddy Evan is a big-time listener of your guys' show. He is celebrating his 40th birthday today, and he was the best man at my wedding. So I have to give a shout-out to my man Evan.
What's up, Evan?
Appreciate you guys.
Now there's no – hold on, Alex. There's no way he's actually listening to the show right now, right?
He said he was going to tune in. He had a meeting at 1:30. So he said if he didn't catch it now, he was going to catch it on the podcast later. So I know he said he loves your guys' show.
What's Evan's last name? Can we say his last name?
Yeah, Evan Titus.
Evan Titus. Is he related to the donut folks up in Lebanon?
He is not, no.
Good up there. All right, Evan Titus, happy 40th birthday, man. Happy 40th birthday to you. Appreciate it, Alex.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Earlier when Rick Carlisle was on with KB and Andy, he was talking about with Kevin Bowen and Andy, the wake-up call. Kevin asked him, I mentioned this earlier, I thought a great question where he just said, hey, I noticed that you play the piano a lot. You played for an event that was in Indianapolis recently. How did that come about? And Carlisle gave an extremely detailed and I thought fascinating answer about his journey in learning how to become a pretty accomplished piano player. Led me to wonder, Jimmy, I'll begin with you. If there was a talent or a skill that you wish you had developed that if you had the time that you would like to be able to really dive into and learn to do, it would be what?
Oh, man. Are we looking for quirky, like America's Got Talent tricks or just anything?
No, like anything. I mean, like something that you're like, you know what? Like, some people later in life, Mark Patrick's a good example of this. Mark Patrick, who now lives in, unfortunately, he's safe, but he's down in the area near where the hurricanes devastated in North Carolina. He's on the North Carolina-South Carolina border in the Blue Ridge Mountains. He is an incredible woodworker, and I think it was later in life where he developed the skill of being a really, and I'm talking elite-level craftsman woodworker, the former sportscaster Mark Patrick. That's an example of what I'm talking about. Like if there's something where you're like, gosh, this is something I've always wanted to learn to do, it would be what?
I wish I had started learning golf earlier than I did. Okay. I was always just kind of going with buddies and just hanging
Hacking
around. But
right.
like I've started to take more lessons, and I'm not, I'm still a very, very, very rookie type of golfer. But I wish I had done that at a younger age, probably.
Eddie?
Being able to understand how the jQuery brain works.
Well, there's a long list of people that you could get in line with that. Now, my brain is totally normal.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
In what way? Give me an example.
Oh, there are certain things that go on up in there that I don't even know that anyone knows. That
In a
goes
good
on
or
up in
bad
there.
way?
Yes.
I mean, we have a sounder exclusively for brain droppings from one jQuery. I feel like that inherently it is.
I mean, it's always going. I'll give you that,
Sure.
right?
It's a
tough.
blessing and a curse, really, honestly.
It is. It is. Any other skill?
I've never really thought about it. More like handyman stuff.
Yeah, I think like just learn like stuff around the house type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know how to do nothing in that regard. Nothing. Literally nothing. I've never cooked a meal. I have no skill with like fixing things.
I've learned how to fix things, and I've learned how to cook a little bit.
What can you cook?
Pasta, chicken,
Okay.
steak.
Jimmy, can you cook?
Yeah, so I think most
Burgers.
people, if you're around a grill, like, yeah, I could do burgers. My signature dish that I like to make every now and again for Haley it's called buffalo chicken chili mac. It's got like macaroni noodles, chopped up veggies, sliced chicken, buffalo sauce into a pot, and then it's some cheese on top, put it in the oven, let the cheese brown for a second,
That's
and then
pretty
bring it
cool.
out. See, even though my brain goes everywhere, like I have ADHD, move around, like, oh my God, what's next? What's next? If I have a recipe in front of me, I'm an attention to detail guy despite all of that. Like, I want to follow the recipe so I can make a good meal out of it. But that said, I don't cook enough around the house.
I would have loved to have learned to play the piano. I mean, that would be one of them. I think
My parents
be
tried
awesome.
that. I couldn't handle that from
Yeah,
the attention
I don't
standpoint.
think
I
that
took
I would-
lessons, couldn't do it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way that I would be able to learn it. I'm fascinated by people that can, or
Same.
even just reading music.
Like the dude that just shows up at the random like piano at the bar,
It's
and he
incredible.
just like is just
You'll see a video on YouTube of somebody randomly that will be in a store
you.
where there's a piano out,
Yeah.
and they sit down and play, and it's like Mozart.
bring
and you're
people
like,
to
what in the world?
tears that pass by. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
with you. I wish I had that skill.
I have always so that would be one. The other is I really do, and I'm really envious of people that have been able to do this. I think it's one of the things that is much easier if you learn it at a younger age. Not saying you can't do it now, but I would love to be bilingual or trilingual.
Sure.
It's amazing to me working in racing.
I thought you were
people,
almost bilingual.
Are you talking about Swahili?
Yes.
I was literally bordering on, in 1995, I was probably 70% fluent in Swahili because I had to take it in college. But I never had any occasion to ever, other than when I watched The Air Up There with Kevin Bacon and was able to actually interpret it. And when I was in New York City, occasionally, usually the cab drivers that will say where they're from, and if they were from certain African countries, I would be like, wait a minute, they speak Swahili in that country. Other than that, there's never been any occasion I've ever had to hear it or speak it. So I basically have forgotten almost all of it. But my name was Bwana Mkubwa in Swahili, just so you know. Like, in class when you have to have like a name of.
Is there a rich history behind that name?
Bwana Mkubwa?
Yes.
A big man.
Okay, nice. That's good.
So they
I'm
call
proud
it
of
the
you for that.
teacher.
That's
The
good.
teacher named me
That's
Bwana
good.
Mkubwa. Yeah. And then we came clothed. But at any rate, I've always thought like learning Italian or even Spanish. I mean, I think we all can understand a little bit of Spanish, but to be able to speak it fluently, especially like Italian, I think would just be awesome.
I'm sure Shannon would love that too.
No, bellissimo. But it is amazing to me in working in racing when I'm around drivers that can speak, like Tony Kanaan speaks like 4 languages. And one of the things that I ask athletes oftentimes if I'm talking to them from a different country or one that is, I remember like Alex Palou when he first came here and was a rookie, he barely spoke English. And now, he's obviously fluent in English. And so I'll ask them, I'm like, so when you are speaking English now, are you still interpreting it in your head, or is it now natural? And a lot of times they're like, you know what? It depends. It depends on who I'm talking to or how fast it's going. One of my favorite questions to ask athletes that are bilingual. And the first time I ever asked it of anybody, they thought that literally, I remember, I think I was doing the show with Derek, and he was like mortified over it. And it was Juan Montoya, that I asked this question. And Montoya, who is the absolute antithesis of vociferous. I mean, he's like basically usually one-word answers. He literally stopped, and his eyes got huge, and he's like, man. And he thought about it, and he gave a great answer. But I asked people, in what language do you dream? Because they say that when you dream in a language, that means that you are fluent in it. Now, have you guys ever had a dream where you are speaking a foreign language?
I don't.
And then you wake up
have.
and you're like, I don't know if that was really a foreign language or just like gibberish. You know what I mean?
I don't think so.
Can't say that I have.
But Montoya told me, in one of the more interesting answers that I've ever gotten out of an athlete, when I asked him that question, he said, you know what, that's a fascinating answer, and I'll tell you why. He said, I always dream in Spanish unless it's about racing. And if I'm dreaming about racing, because when I'm in the car and I'm on the radio, I have to talk to the strategist or the crew chief or whatever in English. And he said, so if I'm dreaming about racing, I dream in English. And then he stopped and he said, but here's what's fascinating. Last night, he said, literally, last night, I had a dream that I was racing, and my dad was my crew chief. And I was speaking back and forth in my dream to my dad in English, but my dad does not speak English. But he was in my dream, which I thought was kind of cool.
Very fascinating.
But I think it'd be awesome to learn that.
You're right about that, though. You start at a younger age. Like I have a niece, Claudia, her dad is a French national. My niece, her mom
That's
is
right, because
American.
you guys watched the World Cup
Right, watched World Cup together. And so, like, she's getting, and her mom could also speak French because she taught English over in France for a couple years. So she's getting the bilingual experience right from birth. Like, yeah, I mean,
so to her, and she probably can go back and forth,
correct,
right?
Yes, yeah.
That's always
Which is
fascinating
so cool
to me when you hear people like in mid-sentence, they start in French, then they go to English a little bit, then they go back to French. It'd be awesome. Now, the other thing that is hard to learn later in life, sports-related, and people think I'm crazy when I say this. They think I'm making up an excuse, but I truly believe it. Do either one of you water or snow ski?
No.
Do I? I tried one time at a friend's lake house. It didn't go well.
How old were you?
15.
Okay. If you meet people that began skiing, water or snow, at a young age, typically they learn it pretty quickly, and then I think it's kind of like riding a bike. If you learn to snow ski, the first time I tried to snow ski, I was like 15 years old, and I was 6'3". The taller you are in general, the harder it is to do. But the later in life you try to learn it, forget about it.
Yeah.
Katie barred the door, right? I mean, golf is probably similar, to be honest with you. I think you can learn golf later in life.
Sure.
But, I mean, certainly it was to an advantage if you learn it at a younger age, because
there's also less risk for, slamming into a tree when you're trying to learn golf versus when you're trying to learn
true.
Pizza French fries is the only thing I know, and I've never actually taken ski lessons. I just know that's the thing.
I'm telling you, the one thing about
and
skiing,
I have no interest in doing that, by the way.
Once I learned to ski, I was okay in getting down the hill, but then I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't learn how to stop. And they're like, well, you just extend out to the side and into a V, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that sounds easy. And it was like, it's easier just to fall over. Literally easier just to fall over. You might have heard big news in the NFL today. We've been talking about that in terms of could help be on the way for the Colts defense. We will analyze next. Man, April points this one out. You imagine being able to tap dance, like for real tap dance? I remember there was like a 6-week period in the mid-'90s when this Michael Flatley was all the rage. Everybody was watching the River Dance and the Lord of the Dance and all. It was like everywhere. For like 2 months, everybody's like, have you seen the DVD? Can I borrow it? But it is pretty fascinating to watch. And if you were there in person, it probably was pretty awesome. That dude was like from Chicago or something and then was like became some European sensation.
I have vague memories because my late mom was very into like, anything Irish, because we had Irish heritage. I have vague memories of going to something like that. I don't know if it was actually him or if it was just like, hey, knock off.
Cool. Right.
But I have vague memories of Irish tap dancing for some reason. Now that you've invoked that into the back
Kyrie
parts
Irving,
of my brain.
by the way, likes Michael Flatley. You probably went to Michael Roundley, which is
indeed.
the cheap knockoff variation, right?
No, Jimmy. No.
I don't know what you mean. That was our high budget sound effects there. It wasn't me.
No.
Eddie, you gotta get quick on the draw here.
No, that was bad.
So the big news just before we came in today for the program is the fact that there is an NFL coaching, not vacancy because the New York Jets filled it immediately internally, but they parted ways with their head coach. Now that is a little bit surprising, but it doesn't necessarily have huge implication within the city of Indianapolis or for the Indianapolis Colts, but does it? Because, and we've had disputes all day long on the correct pronunciation of the last name. Jimmy, if you could.
Robert Saleh.
Eddie, you were going with?
It is Saleh. You said Saleh, so I kept doing it.
Saleh, right?
Saleh.
Like it does sound like a name he uses undercover.
Like Soleil Moon Frye.
Indeed.
You guys probably don't know who Soleil Moon Frye is.
No idea.
Soleil Moon Frye is actually pretty.
Is that a safe one where you're not going to throw your headsets on the ground and leave us? Like, is that one for me to admit safely? Okay, all right.
I would be stunned if you knew who Soleil Moon Frye is. Right. Although I'm guessing if you Google image search Soleil Moon Frye, you'd be like, okay. Right? But Robert Saleh is now a free agent, if you will. And he was a defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. He was a defensive coach in Seattle. Ironically, the first job that he had getting into coaching was on the assistant side of the football at Michigan State. But his entire career has essentially been, and his name and reputation has been built on defensive prowess. And yet, the New York Jets, and I have no idea, if you had said to me yesterday what team tomorrow is going to fire a head coach, the Jets would probably not have been in my top 5 picks. But nonetheless, he has now said, look, I'm good. I'm going to take the year off, and I'm going to chill and go spend time with my family and count my severance package and probably figuring out how he's going to get COBRA insurance because that's outrageous. But nonetheless, that's what he's doing right now. Now, I do not believe that Jim Irsay, Shane Steichen earlier today, according to our Kevin Bowen, has said that he is standing by Gus Bradley. Usually that's like a kiss of death when you get the old vote of confidence, but I'm not saying from Shane Steichen, just in general in sports. But I don't believe that the Colts brass at this point is imminently looking to replace Gus Bradley. Don't get me wrong. But, Jimmy, the reality is this. If they continue on the trend defensively of the ineptitude they have shown to this point, they're going to have to make some sort of a change or move. Maybe not in season, but they're going to have to make some sort of a change or move, and it ain't going to come with the head coach, and it's not going to come with the general manager, right?
No, it's pretty clear on those two fronts you outlined, general manager and head coach, that it would take something catastrophic for Chris Ballard to be looking for a job, regardless of how I may feel on that matter. And Shane Steichen, I believe they like what they have, both from a play calling standpoint and a offensive scheme standpoint, to continue to ride that train. So if you're looking for an area that needs drastic improvement, undoubtedly, if this was the end of the season this week, it would be Gus Bradley be the first to go. You're trying to have all of these sections of your team come together with the same level of Anthony Richardson development and those timelines being on the same track, to the point that even though I sit here and I say I'm not a Colts fan, I don't have a dog in the fight in this regard, it does not bother me whether or not they win or lose games this year. What bothers me, both from just a football fan in general and from a the market that we're in and wanting to see the local teams do well, I want answers on Anthony Richardson. So you're going to have that ongoing the rest of the season. That's been made clear by Shane Steichen that Anthony Richardson is still their guy, regardless of what Joe Flacco is doing on the field. His role is backup and starter is Anthony Richardson. But the other things you're evaluating are clear weaknesses on this team. And if the Colts refuse to look at, depth has been an issue for this defensive roster. The secondary has been something that we've pointed to all offseason and been met with resistance by the front office. Then you need to find other areas to get creative to better yourself defensively. And we mentioned this at the top of the show, but again, to give a shout out to him, Eddie Garrison has a nice piece on 1075thefan.com highlighting exactly this. When you're having running backs, quarterbacks, wide receivers have either career days or season high days week after week after week against Gus Bradley-led defenses,
unbelievable, right?
At some point, you look around both your roster and your staff and say, something needs to change. So I don't know that we're necessarily there yet. I'd be there if it was a switch between him and Robert Saleh. I don't think the Colts are there right now. But from the standpoint of where the Colts have the most inroads to make a change without things collapsing in on itself in midseason, it would be with a defensive coordinator and changing Gus Bradley. And additionally, Jake, I said this with Stephen Holt earlier, 34 points should be enough to win you games in the National Football League.
No question. No, you're
regardless who the quarterback is. That's a mark where you look at it in today's NFL, in 2024, that should win you most games. So you have one game like that, it's like, okay, we'll let it go. You have a game against Tennessee, whoever, I don't know if it's going to be Will Levis or not. I'm still monitoring reports there. Is it going to be Will Levis?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
If Will Levis, the man most known for at this point, Jake's favorite cologne in his closet of the Mayo Day perfume.
His season is going the way of a guy that claims to like mayonnaise to the point where, look, you know what I love?
What's that?
Cologne. You know what I hate? Mayonnaise.
Yep.
The fact that this guy wanted to merge those two together, that alone is reason that you should just be shelved forever.
Yeah, and then I agree with you on all of that, but what happens when it's a 24 for 36, 350 passing yards and 4 touchdowns day for Will Levis?
There's no way, right?
You would think, but if the trends continue of people having career days and Will Levis has that, Gus Bradley, thanks for coming.
Let me ask this. If Will Levis, we're on 93.5 FM, right?
And 107.5 The Fan. Yes, correct.
There's no way that Will Levis can get a quarterback rating between 93.5 and 107.5 against the Colts, right?
Correct.
Zero chance, right?
Correct. Yet, at this stage, would it surprise anybody, show of hands or not, that's bad for the audio audience, Eddie, would it surprise you if Will Levis has a career day on Sunday?
I think it's,
smell like greatness.
Do you know why mayonnaise top brand is named what it is?
Oh, yes, I do, but please go on. Continue.
Because the first time somebody tasted it, they said, "What the hell, man?" That's how it got its name, right?
I like mayo. Not ashamed to admit
it. It's horrific. It's egg whites with vinegar. What possibly is good about that?
Vinegar.
Egg whites.
It's a lethal combo.
I don't know. I love it with my tenderloin, and I love it if I'm making like a nice steak and cheese sandwich with a little bit of mayo on there.
Here's the problem that I have right now with Gus Bradley is they've faced Trevor Lawrence, they've faced Caleb Williams, Malik Willis.
That's what I'm saying.
And they haven't made those quarterbacks uncomfortable. They've given up the 5th most completions in the NFL.
That's what you said in your piece.
They're bottom 2, and it's not bottom. In blitz percentage, they're second lowest in terms of blitz percentage, like the 4th lowest in total blitz. The Lions have played one less game and have blitzed 25 more times than the Colts have all season.
I want to see pressure manufactured. I don't know if that's something that Gus Bradley just doesn't believe in, or if he doesn't believe in the personnel, but especially in a game like Jacksonville on Sunday where you know you're down your playmakers in the trenches and you're asking so much one-on-one with Leatu Latu, generate some pressure. Like, if Jake, I'll say it now, I'd even make a deal with Robin the Genie on this. Gus Bradley deserves to be sent wherever you want, to Mars, to the moon, wherever. If Will Levis has
The
a
shadow
career day if Will Levis has a career day on Saturday,
The Gulag?
or on Sunday, excuse me.
Would you rather go to Mars or the moon? It's got to be Mars because nobody's been there, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Well, that moon landing was fake too.
I go to the moon when I go to Seattle, so.
Okay.
Or on Tuesday.
That's right. Have you ever had that Mars candy bar, by the way?
Yes.
Very underrated. Essentially Snickers, but with almonds instead of peanuts in it, but very good.
What about Miracle Whip? Is that same thing? Like just totally against it?
It's the viscosity amongst
I'm just
everything
I'm
else.
just asking
it's
questions.
disgusting.
We educate and entertain. I was trying to educate myself.
What it is the viscosity when mixed with saliva of both of those to me is absolutely the most disgusting thing on the planet. Yeah. Jimmy's plays of the day are next.
Today's plays of the day brought to you by the fine folks at Greenfield Signs and Lighting. Greenfield Signs, a professional, comprehensive sign company with 2 locations in central Indiana. They'll take your signage ideas and take hold of the project from design all the way to delivery. Family-owned and managed business for more than 4 generations. You don't often get a second chance to make a first impression. Make the most out of your first opportunity with Greenfield Signs and Lighting. For more information, go to greenfieldsigns.com. Today's plays of the day all focused on Major League Baseball. A fun fact in regards to the divisional series, which we're currently in. First time in MLB history that all series are tied at a game apiece. We'll start first with first pitch, 5:08 in New York.
Now wait a minute.
Yes.
So you're telling me there's never been a time where the ALCS and NLCS were both
No, the
1-1?
DS. Just the DS, that
okay.
all 4
Divisional.
games in both the American and the National are all tied at 1 apiece. 5:08 first pitch time between the Phillies and the Mets as the series shifts to New York. Give me over 7 total runs combined for both teams in this game. I will also take the New York Mets to 1 on the money line over the Philadelphia Phillies. In the nightcap, I'll take the
Wait a
Los
second,
Angeles
you changed
Dodgers.
your mind?
I'll take the Los Angeles Dodgers to 1 on the money line over the San Diego Padres. So Mets money line in Phillies Mets. Give me over 7 total runs. And I'll take the Dodgers to 1 on the money line over the Padres. Eddie, any plays from you?
Yeah, I'm actually taking the Phillies here. I really like
nice.
Aaron Nola over Sean Manai. Sean's been really good this year for the Mets. I think the Phillies hammer lefties way better than they do righties, so I will take Aaron Nola. Not to mention that game's a little bit in the day. If it was a night game, I would be a little bit more on the bet side, but I think it eliminates a little bit of the atmosphere. And then I am taking the Padres.
All right. So Eddie's going Padres and Phillies. I'm going Mets
Over
and Dodgers.
7.5.
Oh, okay. So
nice
for
little
that game,
stall there.
A nice. I like it. I like the pivot.
Yes,
So,
over 7.5
Okay.
in the game. I think LA's lineup will be able to get to Michael King, who was really good, by the way, in the wild card round. But Walker Buehler hasn't been good either. The Dodgers bullpen has not been good either. So give me over 7.5. I think we seen some fireworks tonight, and Jimmy, maybe on the lookout for a fight tonight because there was a lot of animosity in game number 2 between Manny Machado and Dave Roberts.
straight ball thrown in the Dodgers dugout. Is that the crux of it all?
The Padres Dodgers. There'll be 4 fights in the stands by the 6th inning.
Sure.
Right.
I'll take the under.
Would you guys like to guess which playoff series right now has tickets going for the lowest amount?
Guardians Tigers.
Eddie?
You know what? No, I'll lock in. I'll stay with what I said first.
Eddie, your guess?
I can't say Detroit because they're playing.
No.
The
I want to
Yankees.
pivot. I'm pivoting. I'm making
Detroit's
that rule.
playing the Guardians.
I'm making.
Yeah, sorry. I was thinking Kansas City.
I'm making a pivot on it. I'm going to say Dodgers Padres.
Okay. Eddie, your guess?
Cleveland.
Jimmy, you should have stuck with your original guess that Eddie then piggybacked on, despite the fact that he's not sure who they're playing. Cleveland and Detroit.
I know who they're
Tickets going for $93 on the secondary market.
Just misspoke.
Most expensive. Eddie, go ahead. What's your guess?
Padres Dodgers.
Is that just for tonight? Are you saying?
I'm going based on tonight and tomorrow nights.
So
that we get all games covered.
Yankees Royals.
Yankees Royals are going for $151. Gets you in the door. Philadelphia and the Mets, $213 gets you in the door. Which is kind of, I guess it's not totally surprising because of A, the fact that there are 16 million people in the New York metropolitan area, and B, Philadelphia is only 2.5 hours away.
I would have thought,
it's been a while for the Mets, too.
It has been. I guess I would have waited just because A, it's the Yankees, but B, like the Royals are a very passionate fan base. Like it's been, a decade since they've been.
Well, the game in Kansas City, $151.
Yeah.
Now do you know that
I missed Dodgers Padres. What was that, by the way?
Dodgers Padres are going for $157. Do you know that when I was living in New York City and was interning out there, I lived in a housing for college kids from all over the country that were all interns from different areas of the country that were interning in New York City. It was an NYU housing division. And basically my best friend that I met out there was a guy that went to James Madison, JMU. So he's a big Kurt Signetti guy.
Sure.
And at any rate, Doug is my buddy's name, was from Philly, suburban Philly. And he was like, yeah, I'm interning in the financial district for my dad's company. And I'm like, oh, okay, so, your parents split or no? Like, what do you mean? He's like, well, my dad works in New York. I'm like, but you live in Philly. East Coast is just different.
Yeah.
His dad got up every morning in suburban Philadelphia, drove 45 minutes to Trenton, New Jersey, took the train from Trenton, New Jersey to Hoboken, New Jersey, got off that train, switched onto the New Jersey path, took that subway into the World Trade Center, 2 hour and 20-minute one-way commute every single day.
Wow.
On the way there, on the way home. And I'm like, so like his dad would get home from work at like 8 o'clock at night and then have to get up the next morning at like 4:30 to do it all over again.
Yeah, it's a whole different beast.
And like that was, it's like, yeah, okay.
Just a normal thing.
I mean, that is some serious dedication. But, obviously, I'm sure he made pretty good coin, but still. And then I knew that the first time that I really grasped just how big and how fast-paced and hectic New York City is. And I love New York City, love it. I mean, not
Same.
like it, love it.
Yeah.
Everything about it. And living there at that age, at the age of 21 years old and living there on my own, did more for shaping me than any other experience of my lifetime. Having said all that, I remember Doug one time was like, hey, we went back to his parents' house for the weekend. And I remember thinking, I'm in the fourth largest city in the country now in Philadelphia for the weekend. Suburban Philly, granted, but we were in Philadelphia for the weekend in the fourth biggest city. And I'm like, and this feels like going out to the country. That's when I realized just how big and fast and furious New York City is. Pacers in action tonight. You can see the game on NBA TV. They are in Atlanta. Jimmy, you will be looking for what?
You can also listen to it on the Fan tonight as well.
That is correct. You can listen to it right here on this radio station. Eddie will be hitting the buttons for that.
I'm curious to see if we get any real indication on where Benedict Mathurin is in the pecking order. I know he probably won't be in the starting lineup out of the gate with this thing, but I would like to see him progress to a point this season where he's the starter. So where does he look and where does the overall rotation flow in this first preseason
Kind of
game?
feels like Jarris Walker is of equal intrigue in that area, right?
Yes, I would echo that same sentiment.
Eddie, you'll be looking for?
Tonight, just seeing how much the starters play in general and how cohesive they look together. I'm interested to see how the dynamic of Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam will look, just because, as Alex Gold mentioned it earlier, they didn't really get a lot of time together at full strength because Tyrese was largely dealing with that ankle and then a hamstring injury all at the same time.
And Atlanta, I think Rick Carlisle had said this morning, they're anticipating that Atlanta is going to go – they really are fascinated by Atlanta offensively, what they can do. And I think that Trae Young is expected to play as well, for example. So we'll see. But it'll be fun. It'll give us a lot to talk about. John, by the way, is taking a personal day today. Greg Rakestraw is in next and will carry you home for the rest of the evening. We will be back with you at noon tomorrow. Tickets again to give away for Driven to Save Lives, the Brian Clausen film. We will do that tomorrow as well. Thank you so much for listening to Query and Company.